She was going to keep you, the witch continued evenly. She bought only 4 rabbits, not 5. You were her pet, her obedient little beastie. Had the day suddenly gotten darker? Anouk looked up, and no clouds blocked the sun. Was it true? Of course it was. She felt like a traitor, like she'd somehow sided with Vittora, that she was complicit just by sweeping floors and serving cake. What happened then? She asked. I explained to Luke that whoever possessed your pelts possessed you. If he could steal the pelts, then he wouldn't be forced to answer to any mistress. He left, and I haven't heard from him since. Of course, that advice was true only as long as your witch was alive. Now you have much bigger problems. Even if you had control of your pelts, the beastie spell would still expire at midnight tomorrow. They had entered the thorn garden, though Anouk had barely noticed. Do you have your pelts? The witch asked, but Anouk was too deep in her thoughts to answer. Luke had been trying to steal the pelts. Had Mata Vatora caught him? Had she killed him out of anger? Mata Zola suddenly took her arm, cupped her chin, and turned her face toward the warm sun. Breathe, my dearie. You look on the verge of shattering. You are each so strong in your own way. Bo has a steady strength like a tree. Cricket's is his bright strength like lightning. But your strength, yours is quiet. There's a reason magic is called whispers, not shouts. Whispers require a quiet soul, a still mind. I could train you. Teach you to truly handle magic, to be what you were meant to be. You're like these thorns, you know, dangerous by your very nature. The wind was picking up, clouds moving in. Think about it, little mouse, the witch said, but think fast. You're running out of time. She broke off a small handful of briars, flinching as one pricked her palm. A few drops of blood spilled out before she could press a cloth against the cut. She touched Anouk's cheek gently with her other hand, and then went back to the potting shed and shut herself up again. Anouk stood alone in the garden. Her mind felt whipped like cream, beaten to turn raw ingredients into something new, but what, she wasn't sure. She tugged out a rag she'd stashed in her sleeve, knelt by the blood drops on the stone path, and began to clean, but then stopped. What was she doing? She cleaned because that was all she knew. Madame had told her that she was a maid, and Anouk would have done anything for a scrap of affection. She thought back to the day Luke had killed the rabbits. He'd been out flower hunting at the market in the Marais, and must have stumbled on Madame and overheard their plans. But Anouk hadn't known that at the time. She hadn't thought twice to see Luke return from the market and slaughter the rabbits in the courtyard. It wasn't rare for him to bring home live crows for pie, live quail for roasting. He'd strung up the bodies in the kitchen. Her supper, he told her, rabbit stew. She'd cooked the rabbits without question, but when she'd ladled out the stew, Madame had taken one bite and slammed the bowl on the floor, shattering it. She'd dragged Luke down from his attic and shoved his face in the scalding stew and broken shards of china. No matter how he pleaded that it had been a mistake, she'd beaten him. Later, Anouk had cleaned up the mess without question. You knew, didn't you? She whispered silently to Luke. You know those rabbits were meant to take our places. You slaughtered them to protect the others, but you couldn't protect yourself. She stood sharply. On impulse, she tugged black ribbon from her ponytail, letting her hair fall loose around her shoulders. At least she could breathe. At last she felt free of Mata, and now she knew what she needed to do. Little mouse, Matazola had called her, as though the truth of what she was written on her face. Anouk touched her heavy jaw, thinking of those 5 pelts hidden away in the car trunk. The littlest one, gray and stiff with a ropey pink tail. She didn't feel like a mouse, not at all. The dark thing inside her wasn't timid and plain, wasn't the type to skitter around the edges of a room fearful of every footstep. I'm no mouse. She stuffed the rag between the branches of a topiary gardener. Clean your own mess. She grabbed a handful of roses, stuffed them in her mouth, and swallowed petals down dry as she ran back to the chateau. She shoved open the front door and climbed up onto the edge of the heavy clay pot in the foyer, then whispered into Toblerone's leafy ear. The bear began to stir with a rippling of green pelt and stretching of creaky wooden joints. On her command, he lumbered down from his pot. He left tiny fluttering leaves in his wake that she followed like a trail of breadcrumbs all the way to the sentinel hedge. She found the corkscrew branch that Petra had used to get in and gave it a twist. She stepped back breathless as the branches began to untangle themselves into the archway. When Vigo and Hunter Black returned, they'd find the gates open, They wouldn't know about the enchanted topiary bear waiting to drag them in his thorny teeth to the chateau as prisoners. She left Toblerone to guard the entrance and returned to the chateau, to the west bedroom, where Beau was still in bed but awake now, groggy, rubbing his head as though it ached. It was cold, and she pulled on her fustian jacket. Anouk, the time! She climbed out onto the bed and pressed a finger to his mouth. For once, let's not think about time. Then impulsively she replaced her finger with her lips. He stirred awake quickly after that, stiff with surprise at first, but then his arms circled her waist and an exhale slipped from his throat. He kissed her back, sending magic shooting between her 2 ears, all the way to her 10 fingers and her 8 dirt-caked toes. One of his hands found her hair, and she in turn found herself touching his cheekbones, his chest, his arms, every inch of him. She felt those champagne bubbles, churning like they never had before, going straight to her head, making her feel giddy and thirsty, and like she was a fool too, that she should have kissed him long ago, that they had wasted too much precious life already. Is this because life as we know it is about to end? He asked, his forehead pressed to hers. She couldn't keep her grin from showing. No, it's because our true lives are just about to begin. Chapter 18. One day and 3 hours of enchantment remained. By the time Anouk had tumbled out of the bed, grinning like she'd slipped too much wine, combed her fingers through her hair and straightened her rumpled jacket, it was dark outside. The lumbering shapes of the topiary gardeners dotted the fields tending to the lavender by moonlight. She squinted toward the hedge wall, but it was too far away to make out the archway or the topiary bear guarding it. Lights burned into the potting shed's windows. She felt her good mood falter. Madazola's potion must not have worked, or she wouldn't still be out there, but it didn't matter. She was past depending on witches for help. She closed the curtain and turned back to Beau, who was reclining on the bed, wearing a goofy smile. The cat clock ticked away on the bedside table, but he ignored it, continuing to smile, though his eyelids flinched slightly at every tick. As far as the kissing had gone, they hadn't done much beyond short, sweet ones on the lips or hands, or once, daringly, a neck. Neither of them knew exactly what came after that. Still, Anouk felt as though they had crossed some threshold where there was no turning back from, to love and be forever human. When she at last turned to the clock, she felt a squeeze of panic. Midnight is in a few hours, and then only one more day, I know. She took his big hand, pressed her lips to his knuckles, and she knew she couldn't lose this, lose him, lose herself. Wait here. She hugged her jacket closer for warmth. There was no sign of Petra or Cricket in the hall, all the better for her to sneak outside and check her trap. Just as she was about to leave the chateau, something metal clattered at the opposite end of the hallway, followed by a noise like a scuffle. She stopped. Something felt wrong. Cricket? She called. There was no answer. Something thunked in the same place, and that squeeze of panic returned. Petra, is that you? She took out her knife, creeping down the dark hallway. The cold bit into the soles of her bare feet. Something thunked again. It came from the direction of the kitchen. The door was cracked open, the smell of nutmeg drifting from it. Would Petra be making more snacks? How much cocoa would the girl seriously consume in one day? Anouk stepped closer, the knife steady despite her erratic heartbeat. Not a mouse, she told herself. Another step toward the kitchen. The floorboards squeaked behind her. Wait! Behind her! She spun around, slashing with the knife. Her blade crashed against something metal. Anouk, it's me. Cricket had 2 knives raised, blocking Anouk's knife an inch from impaling her between the eyes. Anouk had been fast, but no one was faster than Cricket. Merde, Cricket, I'm sorry. They got inside, Cricket whispered. They both lowered their knives, and Anouk wiped her head back toward the kitchen, sniffing the air. Who? Vigo and Hunter Black. I don't know how they got past the gate. Petra is outside in the potting shed with Madazola. We have to warn them. Anouk felt her spine go rigid. No, no, no. Toblerone was supposed to be guarding the gate. She'd used magic. Had her trap failed? Had she made a mistake? A clammy sweat broke out on her skin. The whites of Cricket's eyes flashed. Vigo's in the kitchen. I don't know where Hunter Black is. There's a second staircase that runs behind the pantry and comes out by the stove, remember? I'm going to sneak up there and see if I can take him by surprise. You find Beau and then get Petra and Zola. Wait. Anouk grabbed Cricket's sleeve. Vigo might hear you in the stairs. Let me distract him. Cricket didn't protest or laugh or tell Anouk that it was too dangerous, as Beau would have done. That was what Anouk loved about her. Cricket had never called Anouk a little mouse, not once. Yes, all right, good. Cricket disappeared into the darkness, and Anouk brandished the knife. Took a deep breath. Count to 10. Give Cricket time to get up the stairs. Then she'd show herself. Distracted Vigo, she took a step toward the kitchen. Her fingertips grazed the door. And then something was happening faster than she could process it. The door was thrust open. Vigo's face was there, twisting from surprise to anger and back again in a flash. Anouk. In instinct, she shoved the door wide open, slamming it into his face. Blood spurted from his nose. He let out a cry as she forced her way in and ran to the far end of the table. He pressed a hand to his bloody face. "You broke my nose," he started for her with a growl, and she darted to the side, keeping the table between them. He went left, she went left. He stopped, she stopped. He went right, she went right. Stop, and then Cricket sprinted down the rear stairs behind him and launched off the bottom stair to leap onto his back. He let out another cry as she wrapped an arm around his neck, choking him. For a few seconds it was a scramble between them, a tangle of limbs and feet, and even a flash of teeth, but then something silver twinked in Vigo's hand and Cricket stopped fighting. A pistol. No one moved. What were knives against bullets? And Nook had forgotten that Vigo was a pretty. He could use technology. "It fires," he said, as though reading their minds. "It's old technology, purely mechanical, no biometric locks or electric spotting scopes. The magic in this house would interfere with, almost analog enough that even a witch could fire it, but not quite." He aimed it at Nook. "Come here, Cricket, slowly." Cricket looked steady, ready to spin his face, but he pulled her close enough to press the pistol to her temple. Anouk felt rage burning through her. Her mind churned. She could scream for Bo. She could throw a pot from the stove. She could something cold and sharp. Pressed against the side of her neck, she sucked in a breath. Oh no, Hunter Black's breath was hot on her throat. "Drop the knife, Anouk." She'd forgotten about the shadow that never left Vigo's side. He grabbed her arms, pinned them behind her back. He was so much stronger than her, and Vigo's pistol. What weapon did she have? Nothing beside her mind. Her hands, her whispers. "Dorma," she whispered in a rush. Hunter Black's hand clamped over her mouth, smothering the whisper. "And don't scream." Anouk sputtered against the palm, but he only pressed harder. She met Cricket's eyes. A look of understanding passed over Cricket's face as she realized what Anouk had been trying to do. She almost smiled. Cricket didn't have her mouth covered, and if the magic was what she wanted to do, this was her chance. She pointed toward Hunter Black. "Dorma," she yelled. "Dorma, silencia, etmada, etmada." "Oh, merde, I don't remember." Anouk gave a muffled cry. It wouldn't have worked anyway. Neither of them had consumed a flower or anything containing life. She needed her mouth uncovered, and she needed something pulsing with life. Something like... Yes, she bit down on Hunter Black's middle fingers. Flesh caught beneath her teeth like a ripe apple. Her sharp teeth pierced the skin, and warm blood flooded into her mouth. He yelled and let her go, and she felt sick. Her mouth filled with his salty, too warm blood. She tried not to gag. Vigo looked aghast. "You!" Hunter Black clutched his bleeding hand to his chest, reaching for a kitchen towel, and Anouk knew what would happen next. He'd wind back his other hand to slap her, and he wouldn't stop hitting until she was broken on the floor. She swallowed down a mouthful of blood. "Dorma, dorma, sonora pissimo," she choked out. Hunter Black dropped to the floor. Like that. It happened so fast, so suddenly, that at first Anouk didn't believe it. She stared at his prostrate body, daring to poke him with a toe. "Get up!" Vigo looked horribly confused. "Hunter Black, get up!" "That's what you deserve, Cretin," Cricket cheered. She took the opportunity to elbow Vigo in the stomach, then pressed one of her knives to his jugular, and announced gleefully, "Didn't think we could do magic, did you? Thought we were only good for making your bed? Or keeping it warm?" She dug the blade deeper, and a prick of red appeared, which seemed to delight her. "Now drop the pistol." He moaned weakly and obeyed. "We should put him to sleep too," Anouk said, looking around for something else living to swallow. "We could lock them in the wine cellar, somewhere they can't escape." She reached for a sprig of rosemary, but Cricket shook her head. "Let me." She jabbed the blade deeper against Vigo's neck until a line of blood ran down his skin. She licked it and then made a face but swallowed. "Now what do I say again?" "Dorma, dorma, sonora pissimo," Anouk told her. "Dorma," Cricket muttered, jabbing the knife harder. "Dorma, sonora pissimo, jerkwad." Vigo started to mumble a protest, but then slumped forward, falling asleep more slowly than Hunter Black, as Cricket's whisper hadn't exactly been quiet or precise. As he fell, his head collided with the hard edge of the kitchen sink with a nasty-sounding crack, and Anouk flinched, but Cricket's eyes just gleamed with dark delight. That was so cool, she cleaned and put away her blades. "Is there a spell for smashing things like stupid boys' skulls?" Anouk flexed her hands, trying to shake the odd sparkling sensation in them. The gaslight over the stove flicked on, and Bo stood in the doorway with wide eyes. "What Maleficent is going on here? Get Hunter Black's legs," Cricket said. He still looked confused, but helped Anouk and Cricket drag their prisoners down the wooden stairs to the wine cellar. If the upper portions of the chateau were old, then down there it was practically prehistoric. The walls dripped with unseen moisture, the foundation was crumbled from time. The door to the wine cellar was made of thick oak with a metal grate set into it like a prison cell's. It probably had been a prison cell once, Anouk figured. Cricket dropped Vigo unceremoniously on the floor. Bo shivered. "It's freezing down here. They can cuddle for warmth." Cricket kicked Vigo's arm for good measure. "How long do you think they'll be out?" "Not too long, I hope." Anouk thought of the clock several floors above, with its perpetual tick-tick-tick. She dusted off a wine barrel and dragged it beside the door, prepared to wait. And when they wake up, we've got to be ready. Cricket left to explain to Petra and Madazola what had happened, and after a few minutes of shivering next to Anouk, Bo left to fetch the blankets and something warm for him and Anouk to drink. Nestling in her jacket, Anouk let out a long-held breath. They still had time, she told herself. The way she saw it, Hunter Black was one of them, and so that ticking clock meant just as much to him as it did to her. Come midnight tomorrow, he stood to lose not only himself but his abilities as an assassin and Vigo's protector, without which he had nothing. A moan came from the wine cellar. She jumped up. Vigo? She held a candle to the grate, but the light was too faint to see more than a few feet. Vigo, wake up, I need to talk to you. Hunter Black suddenly loomed at the gate so spectre-like that Anouk dropped the candle. She cursed and searched the dusty floor until she found it again, but she had no matches, so she swallowed a briar tangled in her sweater. Ouch! Incendiary, she whispered, and a flame flickered to life. Hunter Black eyed the candle warily, as though he didn't trust the magic he'd just seen. What do you want? A deal. It took effort to keep her spine straight, even though she was on the free side of the door, and he was locked inside. Hunter Black still had a way of making her feel rattled. I have a proposal for Vigo. He gave a cold laugh. You have no idea what you're going without Luke here to hold your hand. She narrowed her eyes. Despite all your glowering, you relied on him as much as the rest of us. I think you feel just as lost without him. Her gaze fell to the stitches peeking out from his shirt collar, and Hunter Black clamped a hand over them. Luke had done more than just stitch up his wounds. Luke had shown him kindness when the rest of the world had not. For a few flickers of the candle, it looked as though he wanted to get his hands around her throat, but then his face eased. Grudgingly, he asked, How is it possible? What? He nodded toward the candle. You cast magic, just now, and upstairs in the kitchen. Beasties can't cast magic. There was an edge in his voice that went beyond curiosity. She raised an eyebrow. I could teach you to cast a spell yourself if you'd stop being such a... Vigo shoved his face close to the grate, cutting her off. He'd mostly cleaned himself, but his hair was streaked with dirt. What's this about a deal? First tell me how you got past the hedge. Vigo smirked. I know a trap when I see one. We weren't about to stroll through an open gate. I might not be a magic handler, but I've learned a thing or two from the Hote. Witches know to add a stipulation to wall spells to prevent climbing over, but they always forget about under. We followed the hedge for 100 meters and then tunneled beneath it. And that ridiculous bear? He was only enchanted to keep us out. Once we were already in, Hunter Black made a quick work of him. Chop, chop. Guilt twisted in her chest. Toblerone was gone because of her. Vigo touched his throat. Hunter Black, I'm parched. Open one of these wine bottles. I saw a teacup somewhere in here. The tunneling at least explained the dirt in Vigo's hair, but now that she looked closer, it wasn't dirt. Several streaks of his fair hair were now nearly as charcoal dark as Hunter Black's. What happened to your hair? He tossed it out of his eyes. Like it? His smile was harsh. A witch's spells last only 3 days after her death. It's been 2. The spell is fading. He cocked his head. You didn't think my hair just happened to be the exact shade as hers, did you? He laughed coldly. She enchanted it afresh every year. Didn't want any reminder that I wasn't really her son, but some screaming dark-haired baby she'd stolen out of a pram in the houseware section of Le Bon Marche. Hunter Black broke open the neck of a bottle of Merlot, and Vigo kicked around in the dark for the teacup he claimed to have seen. Anouk touched her own hair tentatively. If the enchantment that colored Vigo's hair was already fading, then that didn't mean their beastie spell was already failing? That they were already turning back? Was her mind playing tricks on her, or did her hair feel coarser? She touched her jaw. Was it heavier, more bestial? But she was still just a girl, at least on the outside. Now it's this deal, Vigo said, tossing back the teacup of wine. Chapter 19. 24 hours of enchantment remain. When Anouk didn't answer, Vigo moved toward the bars, tipping his head forward conspiratorially. You and I have always had an understanding, haven't we, Anouk? She was like a mother to you, too. You and I both loved her. We were the ones who did. Anouk eyed him warily. So do you believe I didn't kill her? Vigo snored massively and wiped his nose with his sleeve. Not broken after all, but definitely bruised. You turned white when you have to pluck chicken for dinner. You'd never hurt her. His face darkened. Was it Bo? No, Anouk snapped, but her heart was thumping so hard she was surprised Vigo couldn't hear it. Hunter Black made a slight growl as though maybe he had heard it. We don't know who did, but it wasn't either of us. Vigo grunted non-committally. You shouldn't have come here. Madazola can't be trusted. You'd be safer with me. Come back to the townhouse. I might not be a witch, but I'm influential among the pretties. Whatever promises Zola made you, they're lies. We need her. Ha! We need her. In 24 hours, our enchantment will end, If that happens, we'll turn back to animals, all of us, even you, Hunter Black. The only way to stay as we are is if we get the beastie spell, which Matazola has promised to use on us to keep us human. But there's a problem. It's kept at Castle Ides. She held the candle closer to him, meeting his gaze. We could never get past their security, but you have an invitation. He isn't helping you, Hunter Black snarled. But Vigo held up a hand, silencing him, and eyed Anouk. He guzzled a considerable amount of wine in a very short time, but he could hold his alcohol, and she had to give him that. The invitation alone wouldn't get you in, not without me to present it. Anouk tightened her jaw. Then you'll have to come too. Vigo laughed at the prospect. Hunter Black cursed and went off to the corner to sulk. Vigo leaned against the door, his hair falling in his face. You need me. That's rich. He took another sip of wine. Don't you want Hunter Black to stay human? Anouk asked. And Cricket? His only answer was to drink more, though Anouk knew that he was toying with her. He lusted after Cricket, perhaps perversely. He'd do anything to keep her safe. His china teacup reflected back the candlelight, and Anouk narrowed her eyes. That cup, show it to me. Raising an eyebrow, Vigo complied, holding it up to the grate. It was an odd design, not like the pretty's usual floral patterns. This one had sea monster tentacles amid delicate little ocean bubbles, a goblin design. Her stomach turned as alarm bells chimed in her head. She thought of those rumors of goblins invited to the chateau for tea parties and ending up as potting soil. She glanced again at the wine cellar's heavy door so like a cell's. Who else had been imprisoned here? Vigo scratched his chin, his eyes dangerously sober. I'll help you, but I want something. What? He leaned closer. You put me to sleep with a whisper. Bravo, little beastie. And you lit that candle just now with a whisper. I admit, I'm impressed. I never thought beasties capable of magic, especially not you, my little dust mop. If you want my help, I'll give it to you. He paused. Provided that you make Cricket fall in love with me. Anouk recoiled from the door. Hunter Black stalked out of the dark corner, a scowl on his face. Vigo, this is unwise. That girl, your obsession? I didn't ask you, Vigo snapped, and for a second the scowling mask Hunter Black wore slipped, and beneath it Anouk saw real hurt. Vigo turned back to Anouk, eyes gleaming. Do we have a deal? She didn't answer. It sickened her to think of Cricket gazing at Vigo with adoring eyes, and all because of Anouk. Could she technically even do it? She'd never cast a love spell before, and they were difficult, but she'd heard Mada's Victoria cast one. She knew the words to say and the ingredients to use, and Madazola could help her. Part of her almost longed to try. Forget it, a voice came from the cellar stairs. She won't do it. Bo joined them. His fists were clenched and his face looked grim. How long have you been there? Anouk asked. Long enough. Go to Vigo. We wouldn't do that to Cricket, right, Anouk? Anouk didn't answer. Bo spun to her. Right? She turned away from his hard gaze and those two blue eyes that showed his clear conscience, so sure that it was his job to shelter her from the big scary world. Ever since Luca disappeared, Bo had been trying to fill his shoes, but this was what Boo would never get. Luke understood that his doing was right, and doing was necessary were two different things. Her heart was pounding. She gripped the metal grate before she could change her mind. Get us into Castle Ides and give Hunter Black help if anything goes wrong, and I'll do it. Bo's jaw dropped. Anouk, you can't do this. Oh, Bo. He couldn't protect her from everything. Do we have a deal? She asked Vigo. Oui. Vigo reached his index finger through the narrow gate. Anouk hesitated, then wrapped her own finger around his. A handshake, or the closest they could manage, between prisoner and captor. Partners now. I need to gather some supplies, she said. We'll have to work fast. We're running out of time, and it's a long way back to Paris. Before you say anything, Anouk said at the top of the cellar stairs, holding up a hand to silence Bo, I'm not really going to do it. The tense set to his jaw eased, but his fists were still clenched. You said. I said that he wanted to hear. He'll get a spell, just not the one he wants. Bo didn't look convinced, kept eyeing her as though she were a different person than the girl in a ruffled apron who'd baked him muffins with crumbled sugar on top, and Anouk rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder. I would never do that to Cricket. You know that, Bo. But we need Vigo to get into the Castle Ides. We need Hunter Black, too. We can't rely on Cricket to be the only one with real fighting skills if things go wrong. Bo folded his arms and crossed his chest. So what, you're going to get Cricket to pretend to love him? Mon Dieu, no. She's a terrible actress. I have a better idea, though I'll need a wineglass and some of Petra's blood. Where is everyone? Outside. Zola wanted to close up the tunnel that Vigo dug before anything else could crawl through. Cricket's in the garden. She convinced Zola to lend her a book of spells so she could practice destruction tricks on some poor sapling. She really enjoyed knocking Vigo out. Good. She'll be distracted for a few hours. But she doesn't know about this yet, and I need for you to take down all the paintings in the sitting room that show the interior of Castle Ides. We need views of every room, every entrance. Without blueprints, it's the closest thing we have to a map. You're serious about this, then? Breaking into Castle Ides? I'm serious about staying human. Bo looked at the murky line of moonlight that slashed across the floor. We have 24 hours left. If this plan doesn't work, we're trapped in the city when our time runs out. It'll work, Anouk said, but we have to hurry. It takes 7 hours to drive back to Paris and the same to return here so that Mata can perform the spell. That gives us 10 hours to figure out the plan and actually go through with it. Bo let out a sigh to the heavens. Anouk headed for the foyer. She'd often sat with Luke in his attic rooms as he prepared the various potions that Mata Vittora's more complicated spells required, and while a love spell wasn't particularly challenging, it took just the right life essence ingredients and a particular balance, or the nature of love would be thrown off. Too much vervain, the lover would be aggressive. Too little sage would result in a short-lived crush. She needed the real thing, obsessive love, consuming love. She picked up the hedge clippers that Petra had left on the entry table and an old basket and went outside. How many mornings in the townhouse had she yearned to do this one simple act? Step over the threshold without needing anyone's permission. Such a small act, one that everyone else in the world took for granted. A gust of wind blew her hair back. She worked the franc coin in her pocket between her fingers. If tomorrow night came and they hadn't renewed their enchantment, would Luke, wherever he was, turn back into an animal too? She found Petra and Matazola by the hedge. Fresh soil had been churned up, presumably to fill Vigo's tunnel, and the hedge entrance was closed. She took another step and a branch snapped beneath her foot. Has your quarry awoken? The witch motioned to the fallen branches. They did a lot of damage getting in here. There was a hard note to her voice, and with a sick feeling, Anouk looked back at the branches underfoot, thorns and small green leaves like shiny fur. She quickly stepped back. It was Toblerone, or what was left of him, since Hunter Black had chopped him into firewood. Toblerone, you enchanted him, I know, but you attempted to spell beyond your ability, and now he's gone. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Let's just be a lesson, then. Spells are complex things. Magic isn't something to be trifled with. Members of the host spend decades, even centuries, studying the craft of casting, and you've been alive for what, 1 year? It's impressive that you can even manage a sleeping spell at this point in your young life, but don't get ahead of yourself. You have lifetimes' worth of knowledge still to learn. Matazola gave one final whisper as grass knit itself back over the churned soil, erasing every vestige of the tunnel. Anouk picked up a small branch lined with thorns, a wooden jawbone, or what was left of one. I need your help. She let the branch fall. And yours too, Petra. I have a spell in mind, but I'll need your blood. Anouk couldn't read Petra's face, but Petra glanced at Matazola, and some imperceptible understanding passed between them. Petra nodded. I'll be in my bloodletting room. She left Anouk and Matazola alone in the moonlight. Anouk fished a scrap of paper out of her pocket. It's a love spell. I've heard of Matazola whisper it before, but I didn't know how to do it myself. I wrote it down the best I could remember it. Matazola took the paper, lips moving silently as she read and then smiled. You'll need snapdragons. They spent the next hour gathering flowers and herbs from the garden, seeking out asters, cutting sprigs of bay laurel, gathering everything carefully to keep the buds intact, and then took their supplies to the potting shed. Prince Renard watched Anouk from a portrait hung up by the nail. She let her gaze trail over his slightly crooked nose, the deep-set eyes. It was infinitely easier to look him in the eyes, she decided, when she knew he wasn't looking back. A knock came at the door. Petra handed her a wine-glass full of still warm blood. Thanks, Petra, she shrugged. More where that came from. She looked pale. Anouk frowned in concern. Those cookies I made this morning. You should eat one. Sugar helps after losing blood. This brought half a smile to Petra's face. Not going to argue with cookies. She gave Anouk a nod. I'm keeping watch over your captives. They're getting very drunk. Vigo is, at least. She motioned to the far gardens. And crickets making sawdust out of willow saplings. Anouk poured the blood into a bottle. That I want to see. They made their way to the water gardens, where willows lined an artificial stream. It might once have been a bucolic spot, but now shredded limbs and leaves littered the ground. It looked as though a construction crew had passed through. Cricket was attacking two remaining saplings at once. She was using a regular knife work on the tree at the left, slashing and slicing as fast as a crow took wing, while consuming eucalyptus leaves from a pouch at her waist and using their life essence to cast whispers toward the tree on the right. Mirrored slash marks cut across its trunk, though she hadn't touched it. Leaves rained down, though she was 10 feet away. By the time she was finished, both trees had been destroyed with alarming intensity. She hadn't even spared the stumps. Exactly which royal is she planning on using that spell against? Petra asked. All of them? She's not a fan of the Hote. Yeah, I gathered that, Petra answered. In the glen, Cricket lifted her knives and started in on another sapling. Inside, Anouk and Petra found Bo guarding the cellar door, sitting on a stool with a plate of cookies on his lap. Bo still looked grumpy about Anouk's plan, but at least he was licking crumbs off his fingers while sulking. Have they caused any problems? Anouk said. Bigo's toasted, he said. He was singing Celine Dion. Who's that? You don't want me to try to sing her stuff. You'll go deaf. They took lanterns and the cookies and went downstairs. Bigo's singing abruptly stopped. Hunter Black appeared at the window. If he'd had any of the wine, he held it better than Bigo. His eyes found Anouk's. He was all glares and charcoal smear of hair. If you hurt him, I'll kill you. Bigo pushed Hunter Black aside and smooshed his own face against the bars. Anouk. Good, you're back. Hey, are those cookies? Petra grudgingly shoved a cookie between the bars. He wolfed it down and dusted the crumbs off his shirt. Thanks, Anouk. You know, when I knew this charming girl years ago, she went by a very different name. You're looking good these days, my friend. New haircut? I can't quite put my finger on it. Petra smiled tightly. Don't be in. Can I have another cookie, Petra? Enough cookies, Anouk interrupted. She held up the bottle of elixir and a single short hair from her pocket. She dropped the hair into the elixir and swirled it gently. Drink this. The smirk disappeared off Vigo's face. Is that one of Cricket's hairs? Is this how it works? He'd sobered up fast. You'd have to drink every last drop, Anouk said. Vigo's hungry eyes devoured the bottle. Anouk almost felt sorry for him until she remembered this unwanted hands all over Cricket, and then she didn't feel bad at all. You'll have to unlock the door, Hunter Black murmured darkly. That bottle won't fit through the bars. Not a chance. With a flourish, Bo produced a curly blue drinking straw. When the others threw him odd looks, he shrugged. I found it in the kitchen drawer next to the birthday candles. He stuck the straw in the bottle, and Anouk held it close enough for Vigo to reach it. Vigo grimaced at the taste, but kept slurping until he reached of an empty glass. He wiped his mouth. Doesn't Cricket need to be here? I'm sure she's falling passionately in love with you as we speak, Anouk said. In fact, Bo, will you go get her? She's in the dark garden. Careful, don't sneak up on her. Hunter Black continued to scowl from the shadow's edge. If he was the wolf, as Cricket suspected, would he be so devoted to one person? Weren't wolves lone hunters, or else loyal to a whole pack? How long does it take? Petra's fingernails drummed on the cookie tray. Is this an instant thing, or should I make tea? Footsteps came from the stairs, the glow of another lamp. Anouk heard Beau's voice explaining something to Cricket, telling her to wait, that everything would be fine. At the bottom of the stairs, Cricket wiped sweat off her brow from her fighting practice and threw Vigo a glare. You're still alive? That's a shame. Vigo didn't answer, his eyes glassy but not from the wine. Well, Hunter Black's arms were folded stiffly. Go ahead, Cricket. Tell him that you love him. That you'd do anything for him. Ha! Cricket clapped her hands together. Exactly how much wine have you had? The temperature grew colder, as though the cellar stones were sucking up all the heat. Bo looked uneasily between Cricket and Vigo. But Anouk only waited. She felt Vigo's eyes shift from Cricket and slide across the room, past Petra, past Bo, to stop on her. She shivered. She'd seen that particular glassiness in a person's eyes. Once, a goblin girl, tasked with delivering charmed necklaces to a jewelry shop, had misplaced the package. To punish her, Madame had enchanted the girl to fall desperately in love with the small, yellow postal van that delivered their mail. The goblin girl was still probably walking up and down the streets of Paris following a hunk of wheeled metal that would never love her back. You're supposed to be in love with him, Hunter Black said. Him, Cricket sneered. Anouk could feel Vigo's hot gaze like sunlight, warm at first, but the longer she was exposed, the closer she was to burning. Open the door, Vigo said in a hoarse voice. Bo clenched his fists. Not happening. No, it's okay, do it. Anouk's stomach twisted in hitches. Bo grumbled his disapproval, but he unlocked the door. Vigo staggered out. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair streaked and in disarray, but his eyes were alight. He took a step past Bo, one past Petra, then straight past Cricket as though this girl whose love he'd craved above all else had ceased to exist. He collapsed to his knees at Anouk's feet. Vigo, Hunter Black growled. What are you doing? Get up! Anouk rubbed the back of her scalp. It still stung from where she'd pulled out a strand of her hair and then cut it so that it was the same length as Cricket's. In the dark cellar, no one had noticed the hair that was supposed to be Cricket's was tawny, not cinnamon brown. Oh, merde, Bo cursed, finally understanding. Cricket realized at the same time and burst out laughing. On his knees, Vigo bent to kiss Anouk's bare toes. My love, my angel, my dream, command me, because my heart is yours. Chapter 20. 21 hours of enchantment remain. No! Bo dragged Anouk to the cellar staircase, out of earshot of the others. Absolutely not. I'm not okay with this. How are you okay with this? I'm not okay with this. We don't have a choice. You made him fall in love with you. You, not with Cricket. Well, this is a good thing. He'll do whatever I ask. Matazola helped me rewrite the love spell so that it's a particularly devoted type of love. He'll fall all over himself to please me. You saw him back there worshipping at my feet. He's practically our slave, Bo spat the word. She rested her hands on her hips. Temporarily, we made the elixir potent, but not long-lasting. It'll work 2, maybe 3 days. We need only 1. Besides, how long have we been slaves to him, fetching him tea, polishing his boots, staying awake all night in case he passed out and needed to be carried to bed? Do you remember how he snapped his fingers at you like a dog? How he pawed at Cricket? It's only fair he gets a taste of what it's like to serve. Bo folded his arms. We aren't going to free ourselves by imprisoning others, even cretins like him. But Anouk knew that falter in his voice. Was he jealous? His confession was still fresh on his lips, as were their kisses for the night before. He had to know that this thing with Vigo wasn't real love, so he glowered at the wall. She poked the top button of his shirt and said softly, Easy there, or I'll work the spell on you too. He caught her hand at the collar of his shirt and held it. On flat ground, he towered over her, but she was perched one stair higher, and for once they were eye to eye. It wouldn't work on me. You don't think me capable? Try all you want. Whisper the strongest love spell you know. They'd only be words. I'm already in love with you. Anouk felt her cheeks burn in that pleasantly unpleasant way. She wrapped her other hand around his, squeezed almost painfully. Tell me again that you didn't kill her. I didn't. Then who did? You know something. His jaw tightened. Something wavered in his eyes, and then he shook his head. Who else was in the house that night? Tell me, Bo. But he wouldn't. She let go of his hands, frustrated and a little angry. If he'd only tell her the truth, horrible as it might be, maybe she could return those words he'd said to her. Only a fool. I'm a fool. For now all she could do was look at him and see a person she might not know at all. We don't have time for this. She pushed past him down the stairs into the cellar, where Hunter Black was trying to reason with Vigo, who had for some reason collected a small pyramid of wine bottles in the center of the room. When he saw her, his face brightened. Anouk, my trésor, my cœur. Look, for you I have gathered the finest wines, only the best for you. He collapsed to the ground, then inched forward on his hands and knees to kiss her toes. Taken by surprise, she jerked backward and accidentally kicked him. Oh, sorry, Vigo. He cradled his chin. Oh, no, my goose. No, it's my fault. I thoughtlessly let my face get in the way of your foot. 1,000 apologies, Bo sighed. This is going to get old fast. Not for me, Cricket said, popping another cookie in her mouth. Get up, Vigo. Anouk felt uncomfortable. She glanced at Vigo's wristwatch. 3 o'clock in the morning. Bo, were you able to make a map of Castle Ides? I tried, but it makes no sense. It's almost like the rooms in the paintings intentionally don't match up. Like the floor plan changes. Let me look at it, Cricket said. You're used to following tiny little road maps where everything's perfectly to scale. Thievery work is often less precise. You'll have to hurry, Anouk said. We don't have long to figure out how to break into the most well-protected structure in the Haute. She couldn't hide her yawn. And I need coffee. Allow me to make it for you. My share. Without waiting for a response, Vigo sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I have to see this. Cricket ran after him, followed by Bo and Petra and Hunter Black, though Anouk grabbed at the assassin's arm. Hunter Black, wait a minute. He practically growled down at the small hand on his coat. She was suddenly very aware that they were alone in the dark cellar, and that very recently he'd had a knife pressed to her neck. I know you don't like what I did to Vigo, but you need his plan to succeed as much as the rest of us do. If we don't get that spell, you lose your humanity, too. Besides, the love spell is only temporary. It's not real. Clearly, he snarled. He'd never love you. Maybe someone else would have bristled at the barb, but Anouk saw his mask slip another inch. He was like a wounded creature lashing out at anyone but his master. We need you, Hunter Black. At the very least, you need to keep Vigo from making it of himself in front of the royals and giving us away. You're one of us. Like it or not, we are family. Hunter Black towed one of the wine bottles, sending it rolling across the floor. She took that as yes. She extended her hand. We only have to work together until midnight. He grudgingly took it. Midnight. Upstairs, they found Cricket studiously drawing out a map. Every inch of the sitting room floor was covered with paintings that showed the different rooms in Castle Ides. Cricket had scrawled a rough blueprint on the inside of her forearm, and Matazola and Petra were helping her fill in the blanks from their memories. Anouk picked her way across the floor, holding her palms out for balance, trying not to step on any paintings. Breaking into Castle Ides won't be easy, the witch warned. It looks as regular 10-story building, but in reality, this same building exists in 10 different cities at the same time. A type of portal. The only way to access the upper floors is here. She pointed to a rectangular chamber on the map sketched on the cricket's arm. Through the building's elevator, each floor leads to a different city. Rio de Janeiro is 6th floor. New York is the second. Tokyo is the third. The elevator, coffee, Vigo carried in a tray, holding a pot of coffee that smelled like burnt sugar, nearly stumbling on the paintings on the floor. He poured Anouk a cup. She took a sniff and grimaced. This elevator, Matazola continued, is guarded by the royals' proxies called the Marble Ladies. You'll need to present your invitation to them at the front desk. Vigo reached into his pocket and took out an elegant paper invitation, wiggling his eyebrows enticingly at Anouk. She pushed the coffee away. The royals inhabit the penthouse floors, Matazola explained. Once you get there, you'll be closely watched. Guests are escorted at all times by lesser royals, which will make it difficult for you to get the spell library. And Bo is correct. The floor plan of the penthouse is set to change every hour on the hour. She turned to Cricket. You'll have to keep a close eye on the timing to understand how the rooms rotate. As Matazola explained the rotation schedule to Cricket, Vigo sank onto the divan next to Anouk and begged, Give me a pistol, mon amour. Out of all of us, I'm the only one who can use it. She eased a few inches away from him. No pistol. She might be able to use it, but magic in Castle Ides is highly concentrated. There's no telling what bringing technology into that place might do. Cricket finished writing out the map on her arm and announced, So then, while Vigo is distracting the royals, I break into the spell library and steal the beastie spell. That's it? Easy. I'm afraid not, the witch said. The spell library doesn't contain books, but tens of thousands of bound folios containing the spells. It would take days to search them all. They must be catalogued somehow, Anouk said. Yes, by magic, and they can be located only by magic. She went to the bookcase and took out a glass jar with something small and spindly inside. A captive dragonfly. I don't normally use insects. That's dirty goblin magic, but they have their uses. The royals use enchanted fireflies to locate the spells, but this will do the job just as well. With a proper whisper, it will lead you to the correct folio. Cricket reached for the jar, but Matazola held it back. My darling Cricket, even as a cat, you are prone to recklessness. That might serve you for more action-oriented spells, but this one requires a quiet disposition. Anouk, you must perform the spell. I write it out for you. It isn't easy, but I have faith in you. Anouk carefully tucked the jar in her pocket. So all that's left, Cricket said, is figuring out how to sneak past Prince Renard's own penthouse apartments and into the library without having escorts. Any ideas? The cat clock was ticking. They needed to leave soon. Let Bo drive like the wind. Make up for some precious lost hours. Anouk paced, stepping around the paintings like puzzle pieces, looking at the haunted faces staring back, the beautiful ballroom filled with the dancing royals and musicians to play for them, and servants. What was that? Asked Matazola. Anouk picked up the heavy painting of the ball. Look, these figures in the background, dressed in black. They're servants, aren't they? And servants don't have escorts. No one bothers to notice the maids. Even in the painting, they're just sketched in figures. That's how we get from the elevator to the spell library and back, disguised as servants. She turned to Vigo and Hunter Black. And once we steal the spell, I'll signal to you two that it's time to go. I'll bring a tray of tea to the salon. Lavender tea if everything is good, bergamot if there's trouble. We'll need maid uniforms, Cricket said. Anouk peered closer at the maids in the painting. Each wore a plain black dress, a white apron, and a lace veil covering half her face. The painting didn't show the detail of the specific buttons or the hems or shoes, but she guessed that royals never looked closely at the staff. They wouldn't notice small missing details. The bedsheets, Anouk thought. Those are white, and the curtains are dark velvet. Do you have needle and thread, Petra? Petra gave a laugh. Do I look like I do needlepoint? But then she thought, we have gardening wire. That'll do. We have to take down those curtains. They're purple, not black. A little magic can change that. Besides, no one will be looking at us. They'll be too busy looking at Vigo being Vigo. She waved in his general direction. He was adjusting his ridiculously slouchy hat in a mirror. She turned to Bo. And you'll need to stay outside the car and keep it running in case we need to get out there quickly. Impossible, Cabbage. I'm going with you. She rested a hand on his shoulder. We'll have to play to our strengths. You breathe, sleep, and dream cars. Sorry, but it isn't up for negotiation. He didn't look pleased, but he didn't argue. And you, once you locate the folio for Cricket to steal, what will you do? The other's job seemed so clear. Bo, the getaway driver, Cricket, the spell thief, Vigo, the distraction, and Hunter Black, their bodyguard in case anything went wrong. Where did she fit into all this? A maid and a cook, that's all she'd ever been. And yet there was something about bringing them all together that did feel like baking. Gathering disparate ingredients, a thief, a driver, an assassin, mixing them in just the right ways at just the right times, while keeping a close eye on the clock. What I do best, she said, keep things tidy. She went to the clock on the mantel, counting the hours on her fingers. We have less than a day to drive to Paris, steal the spell, and return. As long as absolutely nothing goes wrong, we can pull this off. She started to take down the velvet curtains. There was no time to sew entire costumes by hand, but she'd once seen Madame Vittoria cast a trick to stitch a goblin's mouth shut. She remembered the spell. It wouldn't be perfect, but they were short on time, and the maids' costumes had to stay together for only a few hours. As long as nothing goes wrong, Cricket muttered. We're so. Chapter 21, 18 Hours of Enchantment Remain. Sitting in the front seat of the Rolls Royce, Anouk slid her hands over the plain dress and white apron. A broom rested at her feet. She adjusted her flimsy veil. The maid's costume didn't fit well, but given that she cobbled it and matching one for Cricket together from curtains and gardening wire in under an hour, that was to be expected. She fought against the feeling that she was going backwards, sliding into her old life. The apron was only temporary, she reminded herself. She didn't have to sweep. She didn't have to polish silver. But still she was startled when she caught her reflection in the side mirror, hair pulled back in a crisp ribbon, dress that was blank and forgettable, no golden threads, no gossamer wings. She folded up the veil and twisted the back seat, where Cricket sat between Hunter Black and Vigo. Cricket's usual wardrobe consisted of ripped tights and shirts and skulls. Anouk wasn't used to seeing her in a starched apron and prim knee socks, with a feather duster in one hand, and she almost had to hide a snicker. Cricket's arms were folded tight to avoid having to touch either of the boys. Vigo, sitting behind Anouk, kept sneaking his hands forward in an attempt to massage her shoulders. Stop it, Vigo, she snapped. You look tense, my love. We're about to break into Castle Ides to steal the only spell that could keep us human. Yes, I'm tense. They'd stuck in the cat clock back on the dashboard with a gum, and now it ticked, counting down the hours until they arrived in Paris. I hid the pouch of eucalyptus leaves in my bra, but there aren't enough places to stash my blades in this dress, Cricket complained. You'll have to leave the big ones behind, Anouk said. Small ones you can hide in your hair. Speaking of, she motioned regretfully to Cricket's curly mass of hair. You'll need to pull it back. Cricket scoffed, offended. Maids don't wear their hair loose, Anouk said. Maids don't wear the black lipstick, but they don't have rips in their tights. They don't show any personality at all. That's the point. You have to hide everything that makes you you. When you move through a room, it should be with quiet steps and small movements. You're not a person. You're not a piece of furniture with legs. She felt a hollow pang inside. She had never thought about it in these terms before. How long had she spent hiding who she was behind an apron, scouring floors for hours in the hopes that her work would be so perfect that she'd be noticed, but she was never noticed. She reached for the old franc coin, but realized she'd left it on her bedroom dresser about the estate. Bo was looking at her oddly. She had her arms clutched tightly across her chest and was shivering slightly. He handed her the frosting jacket from the back seat. She laid it over her chest like a blanket, tracing her fingers over the fabric. When she glanced in the mirror, again, a piece of furniture with legs didn't look back this time. The gargoyle. Thanks, she said softly, putting the jacket on. Cricket grudgingly pulled her hair back into a high bun and took off her charm earring, but she refused to remove her sunglasses. She sighed loudly and slid down in the seat. Her boot knocked against Hunter Black, and he kicked back. Watch it, he snapped. You watch it. Cricket held up a eucalyptus leaf threateningly. Or I'll use the cutting spell on that greasy hair of yours. I wouldn't do that, Cricket, Bo warned. But Hunter Black gave her boot another kick, and Cricket swallowed the leaf. That's it. Prepare to be bald. Insistia coupe. The car lurched hard enough to pitch everyone forward, the engine chugging and struggling. Anouk grabbed the dashboard to steady herself. Wow, what the? Cricket cried. It isn't me. He fought to regain control of the car. I told you not to do magic in here, and it interferes with the car's technology. We shouldn't be fighting anyway, Anouk said. We're all on the same side now. Don't you get that? We're a family. She turned and faced the front. Two hands snaked up to her shoulders and started kneading her tense muscles, and she whipped around again. Vigo, I said no massages. She exchanged an exasperated look with Bo. Witches' boys these days, he lamented. They rode in silence to the French countryside, and Anouk watched the world pass by. Small towns dotted the landscape, and she thought of how each one was filled with pretties, going about their daily lives to school and offices and grocery stores, never one realizing how precious their very existence was, what a gift it was to be them. She closed her eyes. What would she lose if she failed? No more beautiful couture jackets, no more fairy tales, no more cooking, smiling, laughing, only darkness. She shivered awake with a jolt. How long had she slept? She glanced at the clock. It was past noon. It was stormy as they returned to the city. On the horizon, the distant lights of Paris lit up the clouds. Bo adjusted the rear-view mirrors. We'll be here soon." A crow flew by overhead, casting a shadow on the car. When they had left, had it really been only 48 hours ago, she felt as though she were hurtling through some twisted dream world. And now only 2 days passed, and yet those days had changed everything. She wasn't anyone's servant. She stroked the sleeves of her jacket, her battle armor, her second skin. Rain slapped against the windshield, blurring the city into a kaleidoscope of streetlights. The streets were empty of everything except black umbrellas that hid faces. Both circled a roundabout. "That's it ahead." She jumped as Vigo thrust himself between the front seats, jabbing a finger toward a gray stone building lit up in the rain. The Champs-Elysees was lined with edifices, each more impressive than the last. International banks, luxury hotels, boutiques that catered only to the wealthy. But Castleide stood alone, set back from the street behind a black iron fence. 10 stories high, it looked more like a 17th century fortress than a castle despite its name. The windshield wipers swept back and forth steadily, giving them brief glimpses of the structure before the rain obscured it again. The building looked darker than it had in Mattazola's painting. "Scrying crows," Black said, answering the question in her head. Hundreds, thousands of crows perched on every rail and foothold of the building, blackening it with glossy feathers. She had to press her hands against her ears to filter out that incessant chattering. Didn't the pretties hear it? But the ones outside hunkered under their umbrellas, went about their day as usual, and Nook felt a chill. The Holt wielded power over the pretties, but the pretties greatly outnumbered magic handlers. If the enchantments were broken, what would happen? If the pretties' technology continued to grow, would it render magic obsolete? Would the entire Holt become nothing but a memory? "Is it always like this?" Nook yelled above the din. "No," Vigo answered. "It's because Madame Victoria's death. The whole city is in chaos now." Rain pelted the car. If the cars felt the rain, they didn't care. They let it roll off their waxed wings, squawking and whispering and climbing over one another in a tangle of sharp little beaks. Bo stopped the car. The engine rumbled. The windshield wipers went back and forth. Anouk peered out of the window. An imposing entrance with its heavy iron doors. 2 crows flew away from a sign that warned away visitors, though Anouk imagined stronger magic was at work to keep out any curious breeze. The sign read, "The Ides Club. Invitation required." The clock clicked to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. "Ready?" Anouk said. Bo tugged gently on her sleeve, and she realized that she was still wearing the Faustine jacket, clutching it hard enough to almost tear the fabric. She shut it reluctantly. Cricket's hair was smoothed back, her face scrubbed to black eyeliner. She looked different, younger, softer. It rankled Anouk. They shouldn't ever have to be anything other than themselves. "Ready?" Cricket said, brandishing the feather duster. Cricket and Vigo and Hunter Black climbed out of the back. She reached for the handle, but Bo stopped her. "Wait." The rain kept pelting the car, the windshield wipers sweeping it away. She felt as though they were back in that car wash with the Marais where he'd promised her that everything would be okay. He reached into his pocket. "For luck." He handed her the franc coin she found in the Chateau de Millefleurs. She gasped. "Luke's coin." "You left it on the dresser. I thought you'd want it with you. This way, it's almost like he's still watching over you." She leaned across the dash and planted a soft kiss on his cheek. "Thank you, Bo. Be careful, Cabbage. Come back to me. Always." She strung the coin on the chain around her neck, took her broom, and climbed out of the car into the rain. It was cold, and she dashed to the covered porch, where the others waited, collars turned up against the rain, a thief, a witch's boy, and an assassin. The crow's whispers paired with the rain were deafening. Slick oil puddled in the driveway, its swirling colors the only brightness on the gray afternoon. Thunder cracked, and a flock of the crows alighted on a statue by the front door. Renard's granite face looked out of repairs. She shivered again. "After you, my love," Vigo said. He held open the heavy iron door. The others hunched into the rain, waiting for her. She darted inside. The foyer was startlingly bright. White marble floors, white columns, white molding on the ceiling. Even the gaslit chandeliers were glitteringly bright. A wall of glass cut through the center of the room, separating them from the steam-powered elevator, and broken only by 2 small vents at the top and a glass turnstile in the center. "They must have a good maid," Cricket observed of the pristine room. "Shh." Anuka nudged Cricket, nodding toward a woman sitting at a reception desk. Another woman stood to the side of the turnstile. They were both very pale, as colorless as the walls, and very still, with identical white blonde hair and ivory suits that were heavily starched. Neither of the women acknowledged them as they approached, and a creeping feeling spread up Anouk's back. There was something wrong with them. They didn't move. "Don't worry," said Bigo. "Stay Say whatever you like, they can't hear us. None of them are real. He gestured to two more women on the far side of the glass that Anouk hadn't noticed. What do you mean, not real? He fumbled in his pockets for his invitation. These are the marble ladies. They're enchanted statues. They don't think or care what we say as long as we have an invitation. He found his invitation and presented it with a flourish. The woman at the desk snapped to attention with mechanical precision, inspected his invitation, and then abruptly stood. Anouk gasped. The woman's back. It simply wasn't there. The receptionist was only half a person, the front half like a relief statue carved from a block of stone. What if it doesn't work? Anouk whispered. Why wouldn't it? Slowly, the receptionist's white eyes lifted to Vigo. Welcome, monsieur. Vigo smirked and started to enter the turnstile, followed by his shadow, Hunter Black. But with the receptionist slammed a hand into Hunter Black's chest with enough force that the air rushed from his lungs, another one of the ladies lunged out of the shadows and grabbed Cricket's wrist. Vigo stepped back from the turnstile. Hey, relax, he said, making a calming motion and gesturing between himself and the others. They're with me. I must inform you that the rules have changed, monsieur, the woman said mechanically. No guests. The other marble ladies near the elevator stepped closer to the opposite side of the glass wall, one under each of the vents. They were a foot taller than even Beau and wider by a hand's width. But it's Hunter Black, Vigo said. He always accompanies me, and the others are. This change in policy is a direct order from the head of the Haute. Marble Lady continued as though he hadn't spoken. The building is under tighter security. We cannot allow anyone who does not personally have an invitation. Vigo glanced back at Anouk. Any ideas, my love? Anouk thought. The glass wall prevented them from making a mad dash to the elevator, and it was too high to climb over. In every good recipe there had to be an adaptation. Room to substitute one ingredient for another, adjustments to be made in the event of a pot boiling over or a shortage of salt. She could do this. Do you want to hear a story? Luke's voice came to her. And just like that, she was back in her turret bedroom, cuddled under the quilt as thunder cracked outside. Luke sitting cross-legged on the foot of her bed with a mug of tea that steamed delicate tendrils around his face. Once upon a time there was a girl locked in a 1,000-foot glass tower. The prince of a warring country intended to keep her there until she agreed to marry him. No way out, no way down, not even bed sheets to tie together for a roof. Luke had smiled. Do you want to know how she escaped? Anouk thought of the story of the girl and inspected the wall of glass keeping them from the elevator. I have an idea, she said, eyeing the stiff marble ladies, but you aren't going to like it. Chapter 22. 10.5 hours of enchantment remain. As soon as Anouk told them her idea, both Cricket and Hunter Black scoffed. I told you that you wouldn't like it, Anouk replied, but then warily eyed the marble ladies on the opposite side of the glass wall. You're sure they can't hear me? No ears, Vigo said. He was right. Their carved hair covered the place where ears would have been. Well, Anouk said, the invitation will let in one person, the bearer of the invitation, but here's the thing. It doesn't specify who. So we go in one at a time, then pass the invitation back to the next person. We can't pass an invitation through a glass wall, Cricket said, and the marble ladies are too close to the turnstile for us to pass it through that way. That's the trick. It's like Luke's fairy tale about the girl with the 1,000-foot tower. Remember how she got out? Cricket shook her head, looking blank. Luke never told me that one. Hunter Black groaned. He clearly knew it, and he knew what Anouk was referring to. You and Hunter Black have to work together, Anouk explained. In the story, the girl is an excellent climber, but she can't escape on her own. The glass walls are too smooth to climb down, and the trapdoor to the tower roof is too high, so she comes up with a plan, and the next time the prince comes to ask her to marry him, she drags him with willow bark scraped from the bedposts, then leans his sleeping body against the wall and uses it to climb to the roof. She's rescued by something, then. A dragon, I think. A griffin, Hunter Black corrected her. At least get the details right. Anouk rolled her eyes. Well, I propose the same. We can't climb sheer glass, but we can climb them, the marble ladies. You're both in excellent physical shape, Hunter Black. You go through the turnstile, then climb up the marble lady on the opposite wall, and pass the invitation through that vent back to Cricket on the other side. We don't dare drop it. It could get sucked up in the elevator machinery. She'll give it to Vigo to go through. and we'll repeat everything that I'll go through, and then Cricket. Cricket snorted. Climb those freaky statues? That's a death wish. You heard Vigo, Anouk continued. As long as we obey the rules, they won't interfere. And we aren't breaking any rules. Besides, I've seen you scale the courtyard wall just to break into the kitchen and steal a slice of cake. You're an excellent climber. Fine, Cricket said. She ripped the veil off her head and stuffed it in her apron. Hold this. She shoved the feather duster into Vigo's hands, and then, after flexing her fingers for a few times, she grabbed the nearest marble lady's shoulders and set a foot in the stiff crook of her arm. She whispered a prayer as she climbed. She stepped on a statue's shoulder and then on her head and reached the vent. Anouk took the invitation from Vigo and handed it to Hunter Black. Your turn. He presented it to the marble lady by the desk, who smiled mechanically. Welcome, monsieur. He passed through the turnstile. His grumbles were audible as he rested his hands on the shoulders of the marble lady on the far side of the glass and lumbered up on top of her, struggling under the bulkiness of his heavy coat. With a grunt he took it off. Beneath he wore a surprisingly plain shirt. He looked younger without his shell against the world. He climbed to the top of the marble lady's body and reached toward the vent. He could just manage to pass the invitation through to Cricket. She grabbed it and tossed it down. Your turn, Vigo. He passed through, and then they repeated the process, and Anouk went through. Welcome, mademoiselle, the marble lady said. Anouk was just handing the invitation to Hunter Black when the elevator dinged. The marble lady, whose shoulder he was perched on, suddenly turned toward the elevator, and he wobbled, barely holding on. She took a few strides toward the elevator and stopped there, waiting patiently by the controls. Hunter Black jumped off her shoulders and landed cleanly on the marble floor. Cricket's marble lady turned sharply as well and returned to the reception desk. Frowning, Cricket climbed off of her. What now? Cricket called. She was on the opposite side of the glass from the rest of them, with no marble lady standing near the glass anymore. There was no way they could reach the vent to pass the invitation through. Anouk bit her lip, thinking. But none of Luke's fairy tales offered a solution this time. Cricket cursed again. Okay, the vent is too small for me to climb through, but it gives me an idea. Maybe I could make another vent, a hole, a bigger one, closer to the ground. How? Hunter Black asked skeptically. Cricket cracked her knuckles. I didn't learn that cutting whisper for nothing. I've only cast it on wood, but I don't see why it wouldn't work on glass. Even if you can, coming in any way other than the turnstile is against the rules, Vigo pointed. They'll stop you. Ha, but they'll have to catch me first, and you'll get in the elevator and hold it open. Anouk hesitated. No, it's too risky, but an idea was starting to form in her mind. Cricket could use magic. Maybe she could use magic, too. I'm not powerful enough to prevent the marble ladies from chasing you, but there is one simple trick I can do, a diversion spell, the same one I used in the closet to keep Hunter Black from noticing us. Cricket eyed the glass wall, mapping out the cuts she would need to make. Worth a shot. Ready? Anouk nodded. She, Hunter Black, and Vigo piled into the tight elevator, which was made of mirror that reflected back their faces. There was a glittering chandelier overhead, and a panel of brass buttons 1 through 8, and a single button above that labeled Penthouse Escorts Required. The doors started to close, but Hunter Black held them open. Cricket closed her eyes, swallowed a eucalyptus leaf, and began whispering the Silentium Vox. An almost imperceptible line etched itself in the glass wall, turning at a 90-degree angle and then turning again until it was rough square. Get ready, Cricket told them. She gave the glass a gentle tap with her finger. It hit the floor and shattered, sending broken glass everywhere. The spectacle didn't go unnoticed by the marble ladies. As one, they stepped toward the glass wall. Now, Anouk! Cricket cried. Anouk hissed a breath. She had seen how fast the marble ladies had grabbed Hunter Black. If they seized Cricket with those stone hands, she thought of the bird she'd once seen caught under a car on Rue des Monts, crushed. Non avis illa, non avis illa spero. The Mabel ladies slowed, but didn't stop entirely, as though they had simultaneously realized they'd forgotten something important. Cricket moved fast. First an elbow through the glass hole, then her head, then left shoulder, then the right, then torso. Then she was stuck to her waist and had to suck in a breath to squeeze her hips through. As soon as she touched the floor, all 4 marble ladies' heads whipped around as though they had felt the vibration. They all focused intently on her, no longer forgetful. Anouk's spell was fading. Hurry, Anouk yelled. The marble ladies moved in a flash. The 2 by the elevator lunged forward lunged toward Cricket with startling speed. The one by the desk shoved through the turnstile, coming after her. Cricket dodged the closest one, then jumped up onto the back of the other, using the momentum to spring high enough to reach the chandelier. The receptionist she'd used as a springboard reached for her, but she twisted her feet out of the way just in time. Anouk whispered again, non avis nos, sparrow. But they barely paused this time. The spell didn't work the same on stone creatures as it had on Hunter Black. Cricket swung back and forth, building momentum, then let go of the chandelier and went hurtling toward the elevator. The marble ladies lunged for her again, but she crashed into the elevator. Vigo and Anouk caught her as they all fell back against the mirrors. Hunter Black let the door close. He released it. For a few seconds, the steam-powered gears clanked, and Anouk felt her heartbeat pounding harder than it ever had before. The doors were closing too slowly. The marble ladies were coming for them too quickly. They were 3 steps away, now 2. Anouk brandished her broom, her only weapon. The door was still open, 2 inches, then 1, then closed. Cricket let out a cry of relief, sagging back against them. "Quick," Anouk said. "Get ready. Put your veil back on." "Don't I get an amazing work, Cricket? Congratulations on doing magic." Anouk grinned at her and on. "Amazing work, Cricket. Now as soon as the doors open, everyone get your heads down, your eyes low. Vigo, you distract the escort so that Cricket and I can slip away and join the other servants. Yes, but first, my love, a kiss before we take this risk." He leaned in with lips pursed, and she sputtered and pushed him away. "Vigo, gross, we don't have time for this." "I must have one, you heard her," Cricket roared. "Hands off." She shoved Vigo, and he fell back against the wall. A low ding sounded. Everyone froze. "What was that?" Hunter Black snapped. Vigo's face went slack. He straightened, fixing his knit cap sheepishly, and turned towards the elevator controls. The 4th-floor button was lit. "Merde," he cursed. "It's Cricket's fault. She pushed me, and you get only one try, only one floor. You can't just bounce around from one floor to another." "What do you mean?" Anouk said. "Wrong button," Vigo said. "We wanted the penthouse." The round button for the 4th floor glowed brightly. "What's on the 4th floor?" Anouk asked with dread. The elevator stopped. Another ding sounded, and the 4th floor light turned off, indicating they had arrived. "The 4th floor?" Vigo said. "That's London." "Oh, va te faire foutre," Cricket cursed. "London? That means goblins." Chapter 23. 10 Hours of Enchantment Remain. Even before the doors opened, Anouk heard music. It was a blaring mix of heavy metal and accordion and English lyrics, and the tempo kept slowing down, then rapidly speeding up, making Anouk's head spin. The elevator opened. The 4th floor of Castle Ides was boardroom with 20-foot-high ceilings and vast windows along the southern side. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and tall bookshelves spanned the walls. It was filled with overstuffed antique furniture, mahogany tables, and velvet fainting couches in front of roaring fireplaces, but the richness of the room was eclipsed by the apparent circus happening within. One goblin, dressed in a 3-piece suit with a magenta bowler hat, was hanging upside down from the chandelier. His hat knotted to his head with a necktie to keep it from falling off. Expensive-looking furniture was stacked haphazardly around the room, and 2 goblins were using chairs as tables and tables as chairs, with a hodgepodge of teacups between them. Another goblin seriously chased moths with a butterfly net. He had a cup of tea in one hand that he seemed reluctant to set down, which made catching the moths nearly impossible, and set tea sloshing everywhere. "Wrong floor," Cricket said. "Definitely wrong floor." Anouk heard a bus honking. On the other side of the tall windows, a double-decker red bus circled Piccadilly Circus. London was just a magical breath away. London was where the goblins had consolidated what remained of their society centuries ago, when witches had launched a bloody campaign to round up the good-natured creatures and force them into servitude. Those few goblins left had hunkered down in London basements and sewers, and other places where it came in handy that they could see in the dark. Even the goblins Anouk had known in Paris, who likely had never set foot in England, had been almost violently Anglophilic in their devotion to London. She'd seen goblin girls with their fingernails painted like the British flag, and goblin boys wearing neon cravats with patterns of Big Ben, and every time a David Bowie song came on the radio, they all stopped and saluted. "We shouldn't be here," Hunter Black warned. He banged on the penthouse button, but the elevator didn't budge. Cricket pounded on the other buttons uselessly. "There must be an emergency staircase, right?" Anouk said. "If there was," Cricket muttered, "I'd be afraid it would lead to Antarctica." "They've noticed us," Vigo announced, seemingly amused. Anouk whirled back toward the boardroom. 2 goblins in velvet armchairs were looking up now, teacups poised mid-sip. Even the goblin hanging upside down from the chandelier watched them. A pair of goblins leaning over a table glanced up, each wore a monocle. making one eye look twice as big as the other. Their pointed ears wiggled slightly. With a start, Anouk realized they were sort of like dead insects, grasshoppers, flies, spiders, and moths, like the ones the goblin with the butterfly net was trying to catch. They were filling glass jars with their wings. Anouk looked down at her feet. A spider inched toward her Oxford shoe. She used her broom to nudge it away. Abruptly the music stopped. A particularly colorful goblin appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, grinning. He was short, with light brown skin, and had a golden undertone and eyes that seemed to be big, and he was wearing a maroon three-piece suit with a blue cravat. Fastened to his belt loop were at least a dozen brass pocket watch chains attached to various objects tucked in pockets. He sipped from a teacup that was also secured by a chain to his belt. He had a broken heart tattoo on the back of his hand, and Nook thought she remembered seeing that somewhere before. Lost, are we? He had a British accent, a diabolical grin, and a pet rat perched on his shoulder. Yes, she stuttered, clutching her broom. We meant to get out of the penthouse. He took another slow sip of tea, mouth curled in a knowing smile. A witch's boy and assassin, a pair of maids to get out the wrong floor. Another sip. That's the start to a good joke, don't you think? Or maybe a bad one? Behind him, the goblin hanging upside down from the chandelier let out a high-pitched giggle. We were requested, Anouk sputtered, thinking fast. Big mess. Something about an accident in the kitchen. Soup everywhere. Lots of extra hands needed to clean it up. A soup explosion. My, how dire. Anouk gripped the broom tighter. One word from the goblins could sound the alarm. Their plans would be ruined. Cricket's hands were flexing. She was ready to reach for her knives if needed. Perhaps I may be of assistance. The goblin drained his teacup, then produced another object from his pocket that was also fastened by a chain to his vest. A golden key. The goblin into the elevator, slipped his key in the upper slot, twisted it, and pressed the button for the penthouse. He replaced the key in one of his many pockets. The doors began to close, and Anouk felt a flutter of uncertain relief. Had it really been that easy? Until the doors were nearly shut and the goblin in the blue cravat shot out a hand to hold them open. He pressed his face to the narrow crack. The name's Tenpenny, by the way. I run the London room. Stop by on your way out. We're having a party. All are invited. A fly landed on Tenpenny's cheek, and his bulging eyes slid to it. He smiled, his makeup giving him a somewhat maniacal look. He petted the rat on his shoulder. He stepped back and offered them a little toodaloo wave as the door shut. The elevator jerked and then started to rise. Cricket let out a breath. Is it just me, or did that feel too easy? Like they're sounding the alarm right now. Too easy. She shuddered like she'd walked through a cobweb. It wasn't just Cricket, and something about the goblin had seemed familiar. Had he visited the townhouse? Anouk ran over her hair and the veil, and straightened her dress, tried to look normal. Don't worry, my love, the goat breathed in her ear. Goblins don't care for inserting themselves in politics. He tried to put his arms around her, but she swatted him away. Cricket, what's the time looking like? 9 hours till midnight, and 7 hours to drive back to Montrelemar. We'll have to hurry. I don't trust those goblins aren't going to give us away. In that moment she yearned for the simplicity of Montezola's estate. Rich soil and lavender, the hallways in need of a good dusting. She smiled to herself, thinking of it. All those open country roads for Beau to race his cars on, and endless shiny objects for Cricket to pilfer and Luke when they found him. Such a beautiful garden for Luke to work in, and for her she wanted all of it. The kitchen where she could cook wherever she wanted, or not cook at all. The library with its books. The fields where she could spend all day in the sun and night beneath the stars. Her hands were sweating on the broom. My love, the goat purred in her ear, before we reach the top, I must declare that I love you as the grass loves rain, as the birds love the wind. Can it, Figo? The elevator stopped. They all went silent. For a second, no one moved. The elevator's mirrored walls reflected the faces of misfits and nobodies. The doors opened onto an eerily calm foyer. Anouk could hear voices and footsteps in distant rooms. Mahogany panels lined the walls along with the chandeliers and fine sconces. Nothing eclectic. Nothing electric, just like in the townhouse. The floor was made of intricately inlaid wood, and everything was spotless. Not a single cobweb or speck of dust. Cricket rolled up her sleeve to reveal the map she'd pinned on her forearm. We're here. She pointed to a place at her inner elbow. The elevator foyer. It's near the start of the hour, so the floor plan won't change for about another 50 minutes. The royals will be in the west salons, Vigo said. They retire there after lunch. Out of all of them, he was the only one who didn't look terrified, though his eyes held that feverish, enchanted sheen. His life wasn't at risk, despite all the protestations and the promises he'd made Anouk. He wasn't in danger of turning into anything, but what he already was, a spoiled boy, richer than a king, who had never had to do a true day's work in his life. I think the salons are that way, if I have the time right. He jerked his head toward the opposite hallway. Cricket rolled down her sleeve as another maid approached the elevator, but the enchanted pretty girl didn't look up, her head cast down, eyes half hidden in the lace veil. I'm to take you to your escort, she said quietly. Go, Anouk said to Vigo and Hunter Black, and she muttered quietly to Hunter Black, make sure Vigo doesn't do anything stupid. If he doesn't, they'll know for sure that something is wrong, Cricket added under her breath. Vigo opened his lips, probably to recite some love poem to Anouk, but Hunter Black slammed a hand over his mouth. He gave Anouk and Cricket a grudging nod. Be careful. Oh, it's almost like you care, Cricket said. He scowled and dragged Vigo down the east hallway after the maid. They disappeared around a bust of Prince Renard. Right, Cricket said. Let's get the spell before the two of them everything up, as they inevitably will. They hurried down the west hallway, past more marble busts of bygone royals with plaster eyes that seemed to follow them. They turned at the corner and entered a hallway that was lined with glass cases holding treasures. Cricket's fingers twitched as they passed by golden robes and jewels, and oddly mundane objects too. A threadbare stuffed rabbit, an empty soda bottle, a dented watering can. What are they? Anouk whispered. Artifacts, Cricket replied, her eyes gleaming. This was how the royals took power of the great pretty leaders. Not with wars or jewels, but with regular objects imbued with magic. Objects no one suspected. That pair of scissors, it was slipped into Napoleon's suitcase and inspired him to wage war against Russia. They passed more objects, a postcard from Egypt, a bird's nest, a pair of red socks. A butler came down the hall, and Cricket feigned cleaning with the cases. With her feather duster, she didn't have bothered. The enchanted butler paid them no attention, his lips moving in silent whispers to himself. Cricket consulted the map on her arm again. Merde, I'm sweating and it's making the ink run. It looks like the library's down this hall on the left. On the right here, these big doors, this is Chez Blanche, Prince Renard's private apartments. Anouk felt a wave of apprehension, but it was mixed with curiosity. There, through those ancient doors, not gilded like the others, was where Prince Renard laid his head at night, where he looked over his city, where he hung the scrying portraits through which he watched his private world, and maybe had even watched her dusting. She tripped on her shoes and bumped into one of the glass cases. It didn't topple, but the gardening wire she'd used on her uniform snagged and tore. Part of her apron ripped, and she cursed. The costume needed to last only a few more minutes, just long enough to— This door, Cricket said. Wait, no, that's a freckle. That one. She pointed to an opulent gilded door with rich blue trim. Anouk gave a fleeting final glance at the opposite doors, the ones to Renard's apartments, and then slipped her hand into her apron pocket and clutched Madazola's jar with the dragonfly. The finding spell's whisper was poised on her lips. Trauba, Trauba, and Cantio Bestia. The dragonfly would lead them through along the shelves, past folios of love spells and healing whispers, of potion recipes and invisibility chants, right to the very folio, one of 10,000 that was the means of their existence. This is going to be a theft for the ages, Cricket said, rubbing her hands together in delight. She started to push the door open, but a voice spoke at their backs. You two, turn around. Anouk froze. She knew that voice. The deep tone that was both casually unassuming and undeniably powerful, a voice that had once whispered into her ear that wasn't made for sweeping floors. Didn't she know that? Her lips parted. She gripped the broom hard. Prince Renard had given an order, and no one disobeyed the prince. Chapter 24. 9 hours of enchantment remained. He wasn't dressed in jeans and a scarf this time. He looked as though he had stepped straight out of the portrait hanging above Montevittura's mantel. He was wearing a frost-gray suit, with threads as fine as spider silk. A crown of golden briars circled his head, the points catching the hallway lights as though he had managed to ensnare little pieces of stars themselves, and those eyes that seemed to follow her as she had cleaned. Not flat chips of paint now, but the blue-gray shade of the sea, where it dropped into unknowable depths. Impossible to capture with a paintbrush. His hair, though, was still the slightest bit mussed. Cricket lowered her face so that the lace veil hid her features, and nudged Anouk, who quickly did the same. "Your Majesty," Anouk whispered. She clutched the broom close to her chest. Cricket, never an adept actress, half-heartedly fanned the feather duster over the doorway as though sweeping cobwebs, but the way it flopped in her hand made it clear she'd never used one before. Anouk thought it impossible that the prince wouldn't notice such a glaring detail, but he only brushed a wrinkle out of his suit distractedly. "We've guests," he said offhandedly. "A witch's boy and his associate. Fetch a tray of tea and eclairs and bring it to the east salon." Another second passed before Anouk moved. She loosed her grip on the broom, her palms slippery with sweat. Cricket fanned the duster too hard and sneezed. The prince leaned closer. "Be certain there's a sharp knife on the tray." He paused. "For the eclairs. They can be difficult to slice." It took every ounce of Anouk's concentration not to shoot a look at Cricket. A sharp knife? She dared the slightest peek at the prince from beneath the veil, and for a second he met her eyes. A dangerous thrill went through her. She should have looked away to keep her identity safe, but for this one instant, though it was incredibly foolish, some part of her wanted him to see beyond her apron. She yearned for him to recognize her, to tell her once more that she was made for greater things. And for the briefest second, she thought he did recognize her, but then he looked away, bored and distracted, and the moment was gone. "You understand?" "Yes," she whispered, "a sharp knife." His footsteps echoed down the hallway as he left, reverberating off the glass cases. She didn't dare breathe until he had disappeared around the corner. Cricket touched her shoulder, and she jumped. "That was close. I was afraid he'd recognize us, even with our veils." Anouk folded up her lace veil. "All men like him ever see our aprons. I could be Madavatora risen from the dead. But if I had a mop in my hand, he'd still just ask for tea." Her voice was bitter. Bitter because it was true. She had had it in her head ever since the night of the party that the handsome prince was different, that he judged the worth of a person not by his or her clothes, but by something deeper, and to admit that he was just like all the others, the witches and the royals whose gazes skimmed over her like she was a forgotten old lamp, sharpened her anger. "He asked for a knife," she said. "What do you think that means? It's not for eclairs, I can promise you that." Cricket's fingers involuntarily went to the folds of her uniform as she checked her own blades. "It means their top witch is dead and they want answers from our witch's boy, and that they aren't going to waste their energy to use magic when knives will do." Anouk drew in a sharp breath. "You think they're going to torture Vigo?" "I hope so." The thought sat with Anouk uneasily, like she'd eaten too much sticky icing. Vigo and Hunter Black had just walked into a room full of the most dangerous magic casters in Paris. No, she'd sent them into the room, and a handful of defensive skills between the two of them would mean nothing against the royals' tricks and whispers. Cricket thrust the feather duster accusingly in Anouk's general direction. "You look dangerously close to carrying." "Well, incroyable. We need Vigo to get us into Castle Ides, and here we are. Let Renard carve him up into a ham for all I care, and serve him with pineapple at Christmas. And Hunter Black? I gave him my word that the five of us would stick together, and besides, Vigo is here only because I'm here. I'm responsible for him. I can't leave him to be tortured." Cricket mumbled a curse under her breath. "Fine. We get the spell, and then, and only then, rescue their pathetic derrieres." Anouk grinned. Now, Cricket ditched the feather duster and cracked her knuckles. "Prepare to watch the greatest thief in all the Haute perform the trickiest heist in history. Et voila, the scene of the crime, the spell library of Castle Ides." With a flourish, she opened a pair of gilded doors. Anouk felt a prickle of magic as she crossed the threshold. What a library! Nearly every inch from floor to ceiling was lined with shelves containing folios of every color, dusty reds and sea green blues, faded yellows and darkest blacks. The ceilings must have been 30 feet high, buttressed with wrought iron arches that made her think of the Eiffel Tower's latticed curves. A balcony ran the full length of the room, and dozens of rolling library ladders stretched up to the very highest shelves. It smelled of crisp paper and older, mustier things, leather and long-held secrets. Rain pounded at the windows. She'd forgotten about the storm. Spaced evenly in the library were 3 enormous glass cases. They emitted a mottled blue glow that gave the room a dreamlike cast, like it was underwater. Anouk rested her fingers on the closest case. Inside, thousands of fireflies floated on gentle wings, locked in by a magic far beyond her ability to break. "Blue ghosts," she said, remembering a book she'd read. They're only found in the Americas and only for 2 weeks each year. They glow blue, not yellow. The light leads the royals to the exact folio they're looking for. Cricket pressed her face to the case, looking unimpressed. You've got the dragonfly? Anouk held the jar to the light. The trapped dragonfly inside, its only movement a slight pulsing of its elongated body, might not have been magical or rare, but it had its own beauty. Anouk pulled out a chair at one of the mahogany library tables. We'll have to be fast. Renar will be suspicious if we don't deliver tea soon. Are you ready? Cricket stretched her neck. Always. Anouk set her supplies on the table. The glass jar with the dragonfly, the pouch of floral herbs, the scrap of paper that contained the finding spell. This wasn't like the simple whispers she'd cast before, sleeping spells so easy that even clumsy Bo could learn to do them. This was higher level magic, magic reserved for those who were born magical like the royals and the goblins, or who were made magical through unendurable pain like witches. She'd heard rumors of the bleak, severe academies where human girls were trained to become witches. Only a small handful survived the final test, the coal baths, where excruciating black flames tore apart and rebuilt pretty flesh into magical flesh. Who was she, an untrained, untested neophyte, to dare such a spell? She cleared her throat, pinched the dusty floral herbs between her fingers, and choked them down raw. She began to whisper, Trova, talva, incantatio bestia. Nothing happened. The dragonfly rested immobile in the jar, its fractured eyes revealing nothing. Cricket glanced back at her with a raised eyebrow. Anu cleared her throat. I must not have gotten the intonation right. I'd say take your time, but we don't have any. Thanks. Anouk swallowed down another pinch of the dry herbs. She closed her eyes and focused on the tastes, the sweetness of the fennel, the bitter tang of bloodroot. They mixed with the library itself, the mouldering paper of the spells, the waxed floors, and for the briefest instant there was only one taste, only one moment, only one sensation. It was magic. She whispered, Trova, trova, incantatio bestia. The dragonfly started buzzing madly in the glass jar. Anouk's eyes snapped open just in time to see the insect thrash so hard that the jar toppled over. The lid came off. Freed, the dragonfly shot into the air. It's loose, Anouk cried. And then it worked. The dragonfly flew straight up toward the arched ceiling 30 feet high. Merde! Cricket cursed. Keep an eye on it. The dragonfly was a grain of sand tossed in the ocean. If they lost sight of it for even a second, they'd never find it again. With a burst of energy, Cricket bolted for the closest ladder, climbed it 2 rungs at a time, then swung herself up over the balcony railing like a trapeze artist. Where did it go? She yelled. There, Anouk pointed toward the east window. To the upper windows. I'm on it. Well, if I just knew a flying spell, this would be a breeze. Cricket sprinted the length of the balcony, folios rustling in her wake. Anouk paced on the lower level, eyes fastened to the dragonfly as it whizzed as fast as a shooting star. Outside, the rain droned harder, in ripples of water like a typhoon. There, she cried. Now it's behind you. Cricket dropped to all fours on the balcony, pushed off, and ran back the other way. Her pace was breakneck, and yet she was almost completely silent. She moved like a ghost through a graveyard. Anouk would have felt awestruck if she hadn't been so focused on not losing sight of the dragonfly. The insect swooped down over the tables, and Cricket grabbed the iron railing, jumped up and over, and landed gracefully on her feet. No wonder the royals used the blue ghost fireflies. They'd be slow and ethereal, lazily lighting the way straight to the folio in question, not doing the mad chaotic dance of the dragonfly. Anouk glanced over her shoulder for a split second. Was Renard consulting his watch and wondering where the 2 maids were with his tea? A chair toppled as Cricket leaped onto one of the tables, and Anouk spun back around. She searched the vast library space with a plunging sense of panic. I've lost it, she gasped. I haven't, Cricket answered. Her attention focused 8 feet off the ground, near a set of shelves. She leaped on one of the golden ladders and climbed swiftly. It's fast. Hola, Anouk, give me a shove. Anouk ran to the ladder and pushed it on its rolling tracks as Cricket focused intently. Faster! No, wait, it's going the other way. Back, back, back! Anouk sheaved the ladder in another direction. Stop! Cricket yelled sharply. Anouk dug her heels into the floor, breaking the ladder so fast that Cricket nearly lost her balance. But her reflexes were sharp. She climbed another rung and then held her hand over a dusty red folio 7 shelves up. Anouk could just make out the dragonfly resting on its spine. That's it, Anouk breathed. The beastie smell. Cricket shooed away the dragonfly, took down the folio, and hugged it to her chest as though it were some living, delicate thing. The blue ghost fireflies in their glass cases pulsed steadily, and as rain pelted the window harder, Anouk once more felt overcome by that underwater sensation. Cricket climbed down, and Anouk took the folio from her with shaking hands. Such a simple thing. Bound red casing, a single page within, and yet it felt heavy in her arms. People are going to write songs about this theft, Cricket boasted. Wait and see. Songs. Anouk's fingers itched to open the folio. She wanted to silently mouth the words that had made them, and yet it was already growing darker outside. A wet, stormy night was coming. She sniffed the air. She smelled citrus and onion, and oddly it made her think of Luke. She couldn't resist. She cracked open the folio. A single page. Here was all that separated them from a lifetime of humanity. She'd cast magic before. Why not now? Zola herself had said that beasties contained a magic ability. So why must a witch cast a spell and not her? A crow suddenly flapped against outside the window, cawing in sharp calls. Time to go, Cricket warned. Anouk ripped out the spell and rolled it into a tight cylinder that she stuffed into the hollow shaft of her broom. To even attempt the spell, she'd need herbs, wings, blood. The crow pecked sharply at the window outside. We better get that tea, she said, and see if Vigo's been turned into someone's Christmas dinner yet. Chapter 25. 8.5 hours of enchantment remain. They dared not run. Maids don't run, Anouk reminded herself, and that's what they had to be now, furniture with legs, faceless girls concerned only with dust, but she clutched the broom hard in defiance. Maids didn't steal either, or cast magic, or rescue idiot witches' boys, and yet here she was. They'd done it. She held their very lives in her hands, hidden in the hollow broom shaft. What would Beau say? When she pressed the spell against the windshield, they'd fly back to Montelimar, as if the car had wings. Let the crows chase them. Let the whispers and rumors nip at their heels. It didn't matter. As the stars came out, they would stand in the Chateau de Millefleur's gardens, and Madazola would take these stolen words and make them hewn forever, one by one. Wherever Luke was, he would feel the magic of it too, and she'd find him. She would. If she could steal this spell from Castle Ides, she could do anything. Little dust bunny, Luke would say, and he'd lick his thumb and wipe away the perpetual streak of dust on her cheek. You saved me when I thought you were the one in need of saving. She had to lower the lace veil to hide the smile on her face. Which way is the kitchen? Cricket discreetly rolled up her sleeve and consulted the map on her forearm. The hallway on the right, beneath the arch, second door on the left, unless it's past 4 o'clock, then it's the third door. An ancient grandfather clock sat beneath an arch, and Anouk checked the hour, but for once she didn't feel shackled to its ticking and talking. They had the spell. They had enough time for Madazola to cast it, though only just. All that was left now was to warn Vigo, go to the elevator, and down to Beau. The familiar aroma of baking bread and garlic led her to the kitchen. The penthouse kitchen was massive and so crowded with cooks and maids and butlers that she and Cricket had to squeeze their way in. Steam rose from the large pans on monstrous twin ovens. A gaggle of girls rolled dough, stamping Renard's crust into the crust. Cricket slowed, uncertain of the unspoken rules of a kitchen, but Anouk threw herself into the mess, expertly ducking pans, swerving around butlers carrying crates of wine. She spotted a sack of copper trays and grabbed one, hunted up a tea kettle, and sniffed out the eclairs and arranged them prettily on the tray. She pulled a sharp knife from the wooden butcher's block, hesitating only briefly before setting it next to the eclairs. Her hands knew the motions by heart. Boil water, collect sugar cubes and cream, scoop out the tea. She paused at the row of labeled tea canisters. Lavender, bergamot. Lavender to signal they'd successfully stolen the spell and they should all meet at the elevator. Bergamot to mean that something had gone wrong, and it was every beastie for themselves. Her instinct was to reach for lavender, yet the scoop didn't move in her hand. She whistled Cricket over, who narrowly ducked a piping-hot tray of madeleines to join her. Lavender or bergamot? Anouk said quietly. What are you talking about? It should be your choice, not mine. Vigo's been awful to you. A brute. She handed Cricket the scoop. So you pick. I'm your friend above all else, Cricket. If you say the jerks will give a tray of bergamot tea to the closest butler to deliver, and sneak off to the elevator on our own. Leave them to their fates. Cricket was at a rare loss for words. She took the silver scoop and tapped it anxiously against the palm of her hand, leaning toward one canister than the other. At last she scooped out a hefty spoonful from one and dumped it into the pot of boiling water, then picked up the tray and shoved it in Anouk's direction. Anouk lifted the lid to catch the aroma. Lavender. You're sure? If anyone is going to torture the salute, it'll be me. Anouk adjusted her lace veil to hide as much of the face as possible, and Cricket did the same. Then Anouk carried the tray into the hallway. Cricket right behind her with a broom and feather duster. Cricket glanced at the map on her arm and whispered directions to the salon. The door was cracked open. Anouk could feel heat within and hear a crackle of fire and voices, a woman's biting hiss, and then Vigo's petulant moan. In and out, Cricket whispered, hand on the doorknob, like thieves. Like ghosts, Anouk agreed. Cricket nodded solemnly and opened the door. Anouk tried to hide the slight shaking of her hands as she entered the salon. She kept her gaze low, taking in the room out of the corner of her eye. Vigo sitting on the sofa, Hunter Black at his side. Countess Quine, she of the hissing voice, towering over Vigo with a blade-capped fingertip, an inch from his face. Lord Metham in a leather armchair, stuffing a pipe. His wife by the window, looking drearily out at the rain, lips stained green and pink from powder. Where was Renard? His absence made her falter, and she nearly tripped on the heavy fringe of the salon's rug. The teacups clattered, and Countess Quine shook her look. Fear rippled all the way to Anouk's toes. Renard hadn't recognized her earlier, but Countess Quine had been at the townhouse that night too, and so had the Methams. Pardon me, Anouk said quietly. I've brought tea at the prince's request. She bent forward to set it on the coffee table, and was able to catch Hunter Black's eye. His face was as growlsome as ever, his posture tense and folded in on itself, but when he smelled the lavender tea, she saw that mask slip. Was that, could it possibly be, a look of trust? My love! Anouk's short-lived optimism came crashing down. Vigo, the imbecile! He was already pitching himself toward her, almost knocking the tray out of her hands and looking inclined to throw his arms around her. Countess Quine stopped talking and stared at Vigo as though he were speaking in tongues. Lady Metham turned from the window with a quizzical expression. Anouk felt the blood drain from her cheeks, but they were saved by Hunter Black. He slammed his elbow into Vigo's side, knocking the breath out of him before he could say one more incriminating word. Vigo collapsed back on the sofa, clutching his side. Have you lost your mind? Countess Quine asked him. Do you even know this maid? She started to look more closely at Anouk, her eyebrow rising. Hunter Black leaned in as though to help Vigo, and Anouk heard him whisper something low and fast. Vigo blinked with understanding. Vigo choked out. I meant to say that I loved her, Madame Vittora, of course. I loved her as a mother. How can you think I had anything to do with her death? Countess Quine lowered her metallic fingernails one at a time as her suspicion shifted away from Anouk and onto Vigo. Then who did? Anouk set down the tray and quickly poured the tea. How am I to know? She wasn't short of enemies, mon Dieu. I'd have never come here if I knew I'd be subjected to these accusations. My own mother murdered in my house, and you're supposed to be the law of the Haute. You're supposed to find out who did it and bring the person to justice. What about your lapdog? Countess Quine asked, looking at Hunter Black. Hunter Black, like myself, has been trying to solve this murder. What have you been doing? Sipping your tea and putting pomade in your hair, and no one thinks about me. about what I'm going through. Don't you understand how hard this is for me? Adopted children have attachment issues. He stood dramatically. Hunter Black, we're leaving. I refuse to allow myself to be abused in this manner. It's unconscionable, really. Treating us like goblins. Worse, like pretties. You there, you two maids. Fetch my coat at once and escort us to the elevator. Perhaps he wasn't a complete idiot after all. Anouk picked up her tea tray. He started for the door, and then a look of minor terror crossed his face. A figure blocked his path. Prince Renard decided to join them. Vigo, may I suggest that you sit back down, drink your tea, and shut your mouth before it gets you into even more trouble? Prickles tickled their way up and down Anouk's spine. Thank goodness for her veil. She doubted she could have hidden her shock. Vigo, however, was as poor at acting as Cricket was. He stared, open-mouthed, searching for something to say. Your Majesty, really, it isn't fair. Renard slapped him across his cheek. Vigo gasped. You hit me. He startled to protest more, but then wisely shut up. Hunter Black jumped to his feet, and from the way his eyes narrowed, Anouk guessed that he might be fighting the urge to defend his master. Vigo slunk back to the sofa, cradling his cheeks, sitting as ordered. Anouk could feel Cricket's uncertainty as palpably as her own. The four of them were so close to escaping. An elevator ride was all that separated them from freedom. No, not just the elevator. Renard. These people, Renard muttered, as he crossed to the fireplace to warm his fingers. With their little dreams and their little desires. Such a simple phrase thrown out like day-old breadcrumbs for the birds, and yet a cold feeling washed over Anouk that was rigid enough to turn her blood to ice water. Those words. The voice was different. It had been raspy before, filtered through the wires and speakers of Luke's scribe board, but it was the same. She almost let out a cry. Prince Renard had been the man she'd heard through the scribe-board. Her mind started to whirl. Prince Renard and Madazola were the scheming pair that Luke had written about in his secret log. But if that was the case, why would Madazola have sent them here? To the den of her accomplice, to the very man whom she conspired with to take control of the Hote. She felt the prickly sensation of eyes on her, and saw that Countess Quine was subtly watching her from across the room. Her sharpened fingernails clicked anxiously on the glass vial of powder around her neck. Her lips were now stained with a pale blue color. She'd swallowed some powder. She knows, Anouk realized. They all know. What a fool she was. Prince Renard had recognized her. Of course he had. He'd even been expecting her. He had known she was coming because Madazola had told him. Probably as soon as they'd left. And now they'd done his work for him, rounded themselves up tidily like pigs trotting together to the slaughter pen. Shocked, she let the tea tray slip from her hands. Bo. The tray seemed to fall impossibly slowly, as though time were broken. She was distantly aware of Vigo jumping in surprise, but her eyes were on the window. Rain pounded against it, and beyond the incessant flapping of crows. Bo. And then time resumed, and the tray smashed to the ground with the crashing of china. Hot water scalded her feet. Countess Quine cried out, and Lord Metham choked on smoke from his pipe, but Anouk didn't flinch. She didn't care about the boiling water at her feet, the smell of lavender sickening now. Prince Renard looked at her. Really looked at her. No casual glance, no side-eyed peek. He saw her for what she was, what he had always known she was, the prey that had walked straight into the trap he had set for her, for all of them. She turned to Cricket and Hunter and Black and Vigo. Run. Chapter 26. 8 hours of enchantment remained. It was too late. Lady Metham lifted her hands up, and with a single whisper, made the salon doors slam shut. Cricket threw her shoulder against the joists, then fiddled with the lock, but not even she could pick it. A trap, Cricket said. A butane trap. Vigo shoved himself to his feet, tugged his hat off, and raked his hand through his hair that was now streaked with black. His eyes found Anouk's. She knew that look. He was going to do something stupid. Heroic, but stupid. Her heart pounded. It was wrong, all of it, especially that heartsick expression. If a boy ever looked at her like that, she wanted it to be real, not the result of magic. If you touch her, Vigo threatened the prince, I'll break every bone in that pretty face of yours. Renard raised an amused eyebrow. Anouk ripped off the veil that hadn't disguised anything anyway. "Be quiet," she whispered to Vigo. "You'll get yourself killed." Through all of this, Hunter Black remained perfectly still on the sofa, hands resting on his knees, his expression masked by the high collar of his coat and the dark hair falling in his eyes, but ice-cold energy radiated off of him, a winter storm on the horizon, building in strength, and for an uncertain second she wasn't sure which she dreaded more, the wrath of the royals or Hunter Black. Renard tinted his hands together and turned to Lady Metham. "The driver? The marble ladies captured him and brought him upstairs. He's locked away." Anouk felt the air rush out of her. Beau, the only one who might have escaped, but it was too late now. Dizzy, she became all too aware of clocks ticking from all sides. On the mantel, the grandfather clock in the hallway, Lord Metham's pocket watch. Every clock in the penthouse simultaneously chimed 5 o'clock. A cry rushed up her throat. Too late. There would be no drive back to Montelimar now. What had she been 3 days ago? A starry-eyed girl who dreamed of grander things? And now all those beautiful dreams would be within her grasp. If only midnight wouldn't come. She grabbed the broom from Cricket and brandished it like a weapon. "You set us up," she spat at Renard. "You and Matazola. She was never on our side. She sent us here knowing she was delivering us straight into your arms." He smiled, but there was no pleasure in it. "Everyone in the entire Halt is searching for you. Hote is searching for you. You must know that. And you've done well, but there's only one certain way to catch something that doesn't want to be caught. They have to willingly trap themselves." Anouk's knuckles were white on the broom. Why had she never thought of him with any reverence? The light caught the edges of his briar-thorn crown, flashing like stolen pieces of stars, but he was no god. "Put down that broom, little beastie." Renard beckoned with long, graceful fingers. "The spell inside won't help you without someone to whisper it to life. You said I wasn't made for sweeping floors. You weren't. But you should never have been made at all, none of you. It was a cruel, stupid twist of fate, what Vittoria did to you. Gave you human life, and now I must be the one to take it away. Believe me, I have no pleasure in it." He went to the rain-streaked windows, gazing out over the city. "You've evaded my crows. You made it past the marble ladies. You proved that you are just as capable as you intended to be, but it's over now, Anouk." And then he was next to her. Had it been magic, or had he crossed the room that fast? He touched her arm. There was no violence in the gesture. Rather, it was the contact of a herdsman on a skittish horse. His skin was cold from being near the rain-chilled windows. "I said not to touch her." Prince Renard seemed to have forgotten Vigo's existence. Vigo wasn't a beastie, and the royals had no use for a witch's boy with no witch. But Vigo refused to be ignored. He threw himself hard at the prince, and his fist connected with the prince's jaw with a resounding crack. For a few startled seconds, no one moved. Had anyone ever struck the Prince of the Haute? Probably not, if that person valued his life and had any sense, but it wasn't clear that either case applied to Vigo. Lord Metham swallowed a smear of orange powder and jabbed a spindly finger in Vigo's direction, his stained lips already moving in a whisper that would no doubt cause blood to erupt from all of Vigo's orifices. But just as fast, Hunter Black was on his feet. To the royals, Hunter Black was nothing but a lapdog in a black coat. Their mistake, Anouk thought. This was what Hunter Black had been waiting for, Anouk realized. A distraction. And Vigo, God love him, excelled at causing distractions. Hunter Black moved like a rolling clap of thunder. 1 second he was shoving Vigo to the floor, out of danger. The next he was stepping onto the sofa, one boot on the cushions, the other resting on the sofa back. Then, using its momentum as it toppled over to hurl himself at Lord Metham, he struck so quickly that the Lord hadn't even lowered his finger. Unfortunately for him, Hunter Black grabbed the man's finger. A snap sounded as the bone broke, but it was lost amid Lord Metham's howls. Hunter Black whirled on Lady Metham next, who had more sense and speed than her husband, and ducked behind a desk just as Hunter Black flung the teapot at her head. It smashed into the fireplace, sending sharp china pieces raining down. "They can't even cast spells, you idiots!" Countess Quine cried. She aimed her hands in Hunter Black's direction. The sharpened blades at her fingertips sparkled with energy as her pink-stained lips moved in whispers. Bolts of white, hot light crackled out of her hands and struck Hunter Black on the shoulder. He grunted, barely acknowledging the pain, and ducked to evade the next strike. But Lady Metham was coming at him from the other side of the divan. Lanque scintilla morta, she whispered. Oh, shut up. Cricket leapt onto the coffee table, darted out a nimble hand, and grabbed the long pearl necklace around Lady Metham's neck. She jerked it backward, pulling it taut to choke the woman before she could finish the whisper. Hunter Black snatched up the shards of broken teapot and hurled them at Countess Quine. Half of them caught her sparks, deflecting the magic away from him. One spiraled off and struck Lord Metham, who howled louder. Hunter Black turned to Anouk. Get Vigo. Run. We'll be right behind you, Cricket added. Find Bo and get to the elevator. Hold it open for us. With a cry, Countess Quine brandished her sharpened metal claws at Cricket. Cricket jerked back and drew her own blades, but it was a second too late. The Countess's claws slashed at Cricket's side, but something caught them. They both frowned. The metallic claws had glanced off the gardening wire, holding the dress together, and now both the Countess's metal claws and Cricket's blades were tangled in the wire. Without taking a breath, Cricket whispered, Insisha coup. A red line of blood appeared on Countess Quine's left cheek. Her eyes flared as she pressed a hand to it, but her expression became confused when she saw her hand coming away with blood. Cricket whispered again, and another cut sliced down the right side of the Countess's face. Cricket cried out in triumph. Anouk fell to her knees next to Vigo, touching his back. He'd hit his head when Hunter Black had pushed him down, and now he had his hand to a nasty cut on his forehead. My love, I have to get you out of here, he said. I think it's the other way around, actually, she said. Can you stand? She wrapped his arm around her shoulders and helped him up, but just as they turned toward the door, Renard took a step and blocked their path. He was touching his jaw. Part of him still seemed shocked that anyone had dared to strike him. The other part looked poised to turn Vigo to dust. He held the knife from the tea tray, but didn't come closer. His lips started moving. Anouk heard the start of a whisper she'd heard before. Versik sang. Bleed, bleed. He jabbed the knife in the air in precise movements, and though half the room separated the two men, Vigo gasped and clutched his face. A thin line of blood poured down his cheek. Renard slashed the knife in the air again, and Vigo clutched at his stomach. The tang of blood filled the room. Renard was going to drain Vigo of the only thing he'd ever been valued for, his blood. And maybe Cricket was right, that Vigo had made his own bed. He wasn't part of their pack, but maybe he is, she thought. Even now, he didn't seem to fully process Renard's vicious whispers aimed at him. His eyes, glassy and lovesick, were on her, but it wasn't real love, only a trick she'd played on him. No, she whispered. Her whisper might not have been a spell, but it was powerful just the same. She did the only thing she could think of. She swiped a finger over the blood dripping from Vigo's face and licked the blood off. Enceinte comme l'épée. Her voice was as soft as moth wings, and yet all the royals whipped their heads around as though she'd shouted. The knife in Renard's hand turned bright orange. The smell of flesh sizzled in the air, and he dropped it and clutched at the burn mark on his palm. He seemed confused. He kicked at the knife as though unable to determine how it had burned him, but then he looked from Anouk to the knife and back. Lord Metham took the opportunity to swallow a draught of powder and whispered with blue-stained lips, Lanque, Lanque. Magic was still crackling in Anouk's skin. It tore through her, possessing her, consuming her thoughts, twisting them into one single demand. Stop him. Ac ignis bleu. She cast the whisper without thinking. It was a spell buried deep in her memory. It shot out of her in the form of blue fire that blazed across the carpet straight to Lord Metham. Flames licked up his fine suit. He whispered protection spells, but the blue fire moved too fast. Though the flames didn't burn fabric or flesh, they robbed the oxygen from the air around him. He clutched at his throat, gasped, collapsed on the carpet. By the time the flames subsided, he was dead. Mon Dieu, Hunter Black said, breaking the silence. I want to learn that spell. Lady Metham's head was cocked at a too acute angle, her eyes too wide, as though she were a doll that might break. Countess Quine turned sharply to Anouk, one of her eyes twitching and wary. Prince Renard was as much at a loss for words as anyone else, and his eyes settled on Anouk. He searched her hungrily with his gaze, her arms, her neck, her face, the broom she clutched in one hand, looking for something. What? My love, Vigo whispered. We have to go now. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. The movement made Lady Metham snap back to herself, and she let out an anguished cry and hurled herself toward them, but Hunter Black jumped to block her. Cricket fought off Countess Quine, metal fingernails to knives, slicing whispers to cutting ones, but Renard didn't chase. He only stood and watched Anouk with that curious look on his face, almost the hint of a smile. And then Big O pulled her into the hallway. She couldn't catch her breath. She looked one way, then the other, trying to recognize the hallways, but the hour had changed, and with it the floor plan. "We have to find Bo," she said. Both jumped at the sound of footsteps. True, but staying alive would also be ideal. They ran down the hallway. She clutched the broom tightly. She tried to find some reference point, the kitchen or the hallway with the artifacts under glass, but maddeningly, everything had shifted around. And they ran under the stone archway she certainly had never passed before. "Bo," Anouk called, "where are you?" Only the ticking clocks answered. Vigo stumbled, and she caught him before he fell. Her hand slid against his stomach and came away slick with blood. His black clothes had hidden the severity of his wounds. "Merde," she said, "we have to get you out of here." And then the faintest sound. Anouk! "Bo!" With one hand she helped Vigo steady himself, feeling her pulse picking up again. "Vigo, did you hear that? He's close." She called Bo's name, making her way through the maze of hallways toward his calls as fast as she could help Vigo hobble. She threw open a glass door she'd never seen before, then yes, it was the hallway with all the strange little mundane artifacts under glass. To the left, the wide gilded doors led to the spell library. To the right, zut, Renard's apartments. Vigo stumbled again and sank onto one of the benches outside the library, clutching his cheek. "Leave me, my love. Get Bo. Just don't forget to collect me on the way out." "I can't leave you," she said, though she could hear Bo calling her name from somewhere close. "I may never find you again." "Cricket will be able to find the library. Don't worry, I won't go anywhere." Anouk had never felt any affection for the witch's boy until that moment, but against her every instinct she pressed her lips to his cheek. "I'll come back, I promise." And then she ran past the glass cases, calling, "Bo! Bo! Anouk!" Closer now, she pounded on a wooden door inlaid with gold filigree. The knob stuck, but it wasn't locked. She slammed the broom handle against it, and it opened at last. She stumbled into a dark room and blinked until her eyes adjusted. Heavy curtains were drawn over the windows. She grabbed one and tugged it back to let in light, murky though it was from the storm outside. A bedroom. Grander than any bedroom she'd ever seen, even that of a Taurus. Heavy wooden furniture with red brocade upholstery had been pushed to the sides, and the once expensive rug was worn where someone had paced back and forth, enough to wear it nearly through. Other than the fine wallpaper, the walls were mostly bare. There were no portraits here, no busts or statues. A piece of paper fluttered on the wall. Then she took a step closer, smoothed a hand over it. A playbill for a production in Paris, and beneath it, a branch from a tree with dying orange leaves. Things from the pretty world. "Anouk!" a hoarse voice called. "Bo!" She threw open a small door. He was in the next room, a meeting chamber by the look of it, but the table had been moved aside to make room for 5 cages. They were identical in size, heavy iron padlocks on the bars. Bo was in the first cage, the top of which was low enough to force him to his knees. He clutched the bars. A bruise bloomed on his temple. She rushed inside and fell to her knees by his cage. She set down the broom. They clasped hands through the bars. "Those entrance guards, the ones made of stone," he winced. "I didn't even see them coming." Anouk's stomach shrank as she thought of the marble fists on his flesh. The marble ladies must have dragged him from the car, their earless heads not even hearing his screams. "I'll get you out of here." She tugged on the padlock, rusty, ancient, unbreakable except perhaps by a master thief. "We need Cricket." "No, the trunk by the doorway." Bo was breathing heavily, his hand pressed to his head. "Lady Metham put the keys in there." Anouk spotted the trunk. She crawled over and fumbled with the rusted brass clasps. They didn't want to open, so she slammed the broom handle against them until they broke, and then threw the trunk open. It was filled with paper, stacks and stacks of it. From the hallway, the clocks chimed another hour, but she disregarded them. She leaned deeper into the trunk, pushing through the papers to get to the bottom, searching for the key, but she didn't find the key. She didn't even find the bottom of the trunk. There was no bottom. The trunk wasn't a trunk at all, but a passageway, a hole. She was pitched so far forward that she tumbled into the trunk. She reached for something to stop her, but could grab only the broom, which fell with her. Papers sliced at her skin and muffled her screams as she fell down the tunnel. She kept falling through papers that had no end. The sensation of falling down changed to falling up, being pulled upward by some enchanted force, and then she felt 4 wooden sides again. She was back in the trunk, only it was a different trunk, and she was tumbling up and out of it and landing on the soft rug of a small room. There was a fire crackling in a hearth, a wide oak desk, carefully organized with stacks of multicolored folios and parchment and squat black jars of ink and other writing implements and ingredients, onion skins, dried eel, lemons, the tools of a spell scribe, and there was only one spell scribe in Castle Ides, though he went by a more official title now. A shadow fell over her. Prince Renard looked different as he crouched beside her. He'd removed his crown and his frost-gray jacket. His white shirt was rolled to his elbows, the button at his neck open. "Little beastie," he said, "it looks as though you've lost your way." And then she remembered too late that the floor plan changed at the chiming of the clocks. Wherever she was, it was far from her friends, just where he wanted her. Chapter 27. 7 hours and 30 minutes of enchantment remain. Anouk clutched the broom to her chest, protective of the spell tucked away inside. She could crack the handle over Renard's head, shove the blunt end into his face, but his expression made it clear that he wouldn't be caught off guard again. The royals had underestimated Anouk and her friends, and that had given them the slightest advantage in the salon, but the element of surprise was gone now. She scrambled backward and pushed herself to her feet. "What do you want from us? You and Matazola conspired to get us here. The two of you are—" She was almost too embarrassed to say it. "Amants? Lovers?" Until that moment, Renard had worn the mask of confidence that came so naturally to the royals, but now he gave her a surprised, curious look. "Lovers? Why would you say that?" Those clandestine communications," she stuttered. "Meetings in secret. Talk of a queenship." A corner of his mouth tipped up, both boyish and arrogant at the same time. "Ah, I forget that you've been cooped up in a broom closet most of your life. You aren't familiar with the ways of the Shadow Royalty. Matazola is more powerful than many handlers knew. Her abilities surpassed even Vittora's. I didn't banish her for insubordination. I knew that was a lie, but to keep her power in check. But our world is in danger, Anouk. Every day the pretties develop new technologies. The ways of magic are fading. I decided that an alliance of her power and mine might be the only way forward. So I offered her a place at my side, a queenship. Though among royals, marriages are not the romantic storybook things that pretties tell their children. They are political unions of power. A union designed to capture us. Those 5 cages I saw are for the 5 of us, aren't they?" He didn't deny it. He straightened, dusting off his hands. The spell-scribed room was barely large enough for a desk and a chair, and with the 2 of them in it, the space felt too full. "And yet only 4 have come. Where is the 5th one, the gardener?" She paused, surprised. All of her bravado disappeared, and she sputtered, "You mean you don't know either? If I did, I would have come for you at Montelamar. We were waiting for you to lead us to him. But I don't know where he is," she admitted. "I thought he'd be here. Or at Matazola's estate. He's been missing for over a week." Renard considered this, and for a brief moment Anouk forgot he was her enemy. It felt as though they were simply 2 people caught in a mystery. Her dress felt itchy. The heavy curtain fabric, the stiff wires, or was it something else? The feeling of fur or feathers or scales beneath her skin. "I suppose at midnight," she said bitterly, "it won't matter anyway." "That would be true," he said evenly, "if I wanted the 5 of you gone. Don't you?" He shook his head slowly, coming toward her with those eyes that held that tapetus sheen. They caught the firelight like there was something beneath the iris, a stone beneath a stream. She took a step backward, but bumped up against his desk. Pieces of parchment fluttered to the floor. She held the broom across her body. It was all that separated them, a scrap of wood and straw. I went to the party at Madavatora's home 3 nights ago to see if the rumors were true that she kept beasties as servants. Imagine my surprise to find that they were. That fool Vittoria had no sense of the powerful magic she was toying with. To think she was using the most dangerous order of the Hote to clean her cobwebs. But perhaps I speak too harshly of the dead. Few magic handlers know the full dark history of the beasties, and perhaps I share a portion of the blame. I should have seen months ago, through the portraits, that you are more than a girl with a ribbon in her hair and a rag in her hand. But our empire is vast and our numbers are small. We cannot spy on everyone. He turned to a gilded frame on the wall that held only a blank white space. Was this how he spied on his kingdom? When I returned to Castle Ides after the dinner party, I sent orders to the lesser lords that the 5 of you needed to be dealt with immediately. They were to come to the house the following day and take all the 5 of you from Madavatora by force if necessary. I had no way of knowing, of course, that she would be murdered and the 4 of you would flee. Visions flashed in her mind again of blood blooming on her mistress's blouse. Understand me, Renard continued. Beasties have not historically been agreeable creatures, a fact that brings me much regret. They were fundamentally unstable. Many innocent people died. As their creator, I was the one who had to destroy them, and then shelve the beastie spell indefinitely. And so, despite my wishes, I thought I had no choice but to destroy you as well, until my spies told me of a different story. The fire crackled softly. He touched her hair. Her lace veil was long since gone, her hair once more in tangled knots. His long fingers threaded delicately through her hair, and she felt the brush of his cheek against the side of her face as he leaned close. He breathed in, smelling her hair, and her heart thumped in a warning. She squeezed the broom tighter. When he straightened, he held something that had been tangled in her locks, a thyme sprig. It smelled woody and of Marazola's estate. They told me of this, of magic. He motioned to the thyme. His voice was as quiet as dawn, and it felt like magic too. You have Petra to thank for your lives. She told me, taking the great risk of going behind her mistress's back, what my crows could not see and what Madazola didn't want me to know, that you could do magic, not unharnessed, destructive conjuring like the original beasties, higher magic, true enchantment, and you, Anouk, showed me that just now in the salon. You took Lord Metham's life with the blue fire spell, and yet you weren't bound by the Vitae Echo. If a witch had done that, her eyes would have turned to oak. The thyme sprig spun in his fingers, the smell making her think of late summer. You and your friends aren't like the original beasties. Whatever alteration Madavatora mistakenly made to the spell, it was a lucky twist of fate, and so I intended to capture you, but not to kill you. To uphold the spell to keep you human. He was telling her that midnight didn't have to mean the end for them, and yet she didn't dare believe it. If you trusted us, you wouldn't need cages. Ah, but you see, there are those among us who still wish to see you destroyed, who don't yet believe you are more stable than the originals, who claim Madavatora must have died at a beastie's violent hand, hence the cages, as protection until we are certain you won't slaughter the lot of us. He rubbed the thyme between his fingers, and it smelled alive, awake, reminding her that this wasn't just a dream. So tell me, little beastie, what am I to do with you? Well, I haven't killed you yet, so you could let me go. You killed Lord Metham. Not for the joy of it. He smiled. The original beasties weren't joyfully savage at first, either. They grew unhinged as they aged. You have spent barely 1 year as a human, isn't that right? You are nothing but virtue, devotion. What of the others? The older ones. Already they are disobedient, thieving, traitorous. Someone killed Mana Vittora after all. It wasn't any of us, she argued. And you can't blame us for disobeying a mistress who treated us like slaves, and I'm not as innocent as you think. His eyes shimmered. I fear that I believe you. He took a few steps backward. She felt a rush of space. She could breathe again. With a touch of powder to his lips, he whispered a spell and opened the door. Whatever had been behind it moments ago was gone. Now it led to the meeting room with its 5 cages. Bo grabbed at the bars. Anouk? Bo! Renard blocked the doorway before she could run to him. I will make you a promise, little beasties, he said. I'll keep you from turning back into animals. I don't need the spell hidden in the broom handle. The words are already carved into the flesh of my tongue. And I'll do more than that. I'll use every spy in the host to find your gardener friend before midnight, and I'll keep him human too. Anu glanced at Bo. I'm afraid of the price of an offer like that. There's no catch, the prince replied. Bo said from his cage, There's always a catch. The prince smiled joyously. I've been alive a long time. I have amassed lifetimes of knowledge and experience. But that doesn't come without a cost. I've lost perspective. We need new blood in the Hote, a new way of seeing. He was looking at Anouk. The wind had died, and the stillness in the air made the moment feel caught in time, as though they had stepped into a pocket world that was just large enough for the 3 of them. She could feel energy thrumming in the prince's movements, but he was tightly contained. Everything about him whispered control. Maybe that was the problem, she thought. Too much control made for a rigid heart. Hearts were made to beat steadily, yes, but they were also meant to tremble. How long had it been since something had caused Prince Renard's heartbeat to falter? I went about this all wrong, he continued. I see now that you aren't meant to be caged. But you must understand that I had no way of knowing you would be any different from the original beasties. Your magic is everything I ever wanted and more. You are powerful, Anouk. With the right training, you could help restore the balance. If you think I'm out of touch, show me. If you think I am cold, teach me. Make me remember what it feels like to see the world as you do, full of beauty and hope. In return, you will no longer need to fear midnight. Not any of you. He looked as if he had the first time she'd seen him, not the handsome prince in a portrait, but the boy in a scarf standing on a Paris street. That boy was still there, somewhere, that spell scribe who had written the beastie spell in hopes of creating a better world. As long as we agree to be your monsters, she countered. Monsters? No! I want you to be something far more dangerous. Somehow, in the space of a heartbeat, he was by her side, so close that she could feel the crackling energy in his body, not so tightly coiled now. Behind him, Bo was an angry, trapped shadow. And what is that? Princess of the Hote? Chapter 28. 7 hours of enchantment remain. Anouk stared at him as though she hadn't heard correctly. Days ago, she'd been on her hands and knees scrubbing biscuit crumbs from between kitchen tiles. Her dreams had felt big and impossible, walking in Paris arm in arm with someone like the pretties did, making a wish on the fountain, dreams that felt childish now that the Prince of the Shadow Royals was offering her an entire kingdom. A political arrangement, he continued, the same proposal I had discussed with Matazola, but of course, now I see how much more suitable a partner you would be. The ways of the Shadow Royals are ancient but effective. We will rule side by side, equals in all things. I'll teach you to develop your magic. You'll show me how not to misuse my own. For a second, he looked as though he wanted to take the beastie spell from her broom and fold it between their palms, the spell that would bind them forever. But he didn't. Anouk, don't listen to him, Bo called from the other room. He was gripping the bars with white knuckles, but she couldn't go to him while the prince blocked the doorway. No cages, Prince Renard said temptingly in a quiet voice meant only for her. No banishments. No chains. Say the word and the chauffeur is free. And what of love? He raised an eyebrow. That's up to you. She didn't trust him. Of course she didn't. Even if he wasn't intentionally lying to her, his mind was as twisted by the vitae echo as the witch's had been. He might say he wanted equality, and mean it, but like shifting winds, he might just as easily change his mind. And of course there was Bo. The few kisses they'd shared might mean little to the young pretties who gave out kisses like corner store candy, but what they had was more delicate, more complex, like a chocolate souffle. It was just as sweet, but you had to take your time and pay attention to it, or it would collapse in a spectacular mess. And yet, if she refused the prince, would she, all of them, end up animals forever? Renard was offering her a chance to save herself and her friends, like in one of Luke's fairy tales where a girl made a deal with death but found that the deal was riddled with catches. I thought there was nothing worse than dying, the girl said. I was wrong. Don't do it, Anouk, Bo called again. From somewhere, a clock was ticking. How many hours did they have left? 6? 5? A spider crawled across the floor. She couldn't help staring at it, trying to remember what life felt like when the only things that mattered were fear and hunger. She'd lead them here. She'd led them here. She'd convinced them to risk everything, and now the decision rested in her hands once more. Did she resist and risk returning to that, or obey and live? Renard held his back to Beau. He didn't see Beau reach between the bars for the spider. Anouk felt a flash of danger. What crazy idea had gotten into his head? His fist closed around the spider and he shut his eyes and popped it into his mouth. She squeaked a gasp of surprise. Beau made a face as he choked down the spider. He drew in a breath and began to whisper, though he was trying to be quiet. Quiet for Beau was like a shout to her. Too loud, she thought. Renard will hear. No, she spat out. No, that's my answer. I'll never agree to be yours. Dorma, Dorma, Beau whispered behind them. Too late. Prince Renard heard the whisper. His midnight eyes flashed. A counterspell was already on his lips, and in a fraction of a breath he would have silenced Beau, but Beau finished his first. Prince Renard stumbled as though he'd been hit over the head. Beau's whisper had been murmured and unclear, as though he'd spoken with rocks in his mouth. Renard doubled over and fell on all fours. He was fighting to keep his head up, his eyes open. He lost the battle to stay conscious and collapsed to the floor. Anouk stared, unable to believe what she'd seen. Beau, you did magic. Well, poorly. Anouk dug through Renard's pockets for the key and unlocked the door to Beau's cage. As soon as Beau was free, she threw her arms around him. He felt alive, warm, almost too warm, as though some sickness was inside him. Something inside her burned in response. Maybe not a sickness after all. Maybe their true natures. We can't trust the royals, he said. But Renard had a point. If we leave, we'll be running away from the only magic handlers who can cast the beastie spell. The words of the Silentium Vox conjured themselves behind her teeth, and again she longed to gather the right ingredients. To try. She grabbed a shirt collar. I'd rather have one last night as ourselves than a lifetime in cages. Let's get out of here. She grabbed her broom, and they ran through the labyrinth of Renard's apartments, his bedroom, a bath with a golden tub, a personal library, the walls lined with books, real books, unmagical stories from the pretty world, a jacket flung over a chair, a volume with a teaspoon used as a bookmark. Rumpled sheets on the unmade bed told her two things. Renard didn't let maids into his private chambers. She'd guessed this, given the spider, and his sleep was too troubled for dreams. They reached an empty antechamber with doors on all sides. Anouk threw open a random door, a linen closet. The next, an exterior garden. Beau started from the opposite side. He opened a door and found a rickety staircase plunging downward. Here, Anouk called. At last she'd found a sight she recognized, the artifact hallway. They ran into it, and Anouk stopped short of the row of empty benches outside the spell library doors. Vigo's supposed to be here. The sound of approaching footsteps came from down the hall. Merde, Beau cursed. The other royals are coming. It was too late to run for the elevator, so Anouk and Beau started to hustle the other way, but stopped when a voice called out, "Wait, it's us!" They turned as Cricket and Hunter Black came around the corner with Vigo hobbling between them. The five of them clasped hands, delighted at their small reunion, but then they heard more footsteps. The smile fell off Cricket's face. "About 24 duchesses are right behind us," she said. "Let's not make it easy for them." Anouk raised the broom. She remembered how in the salon Hunter Black had used the broken shards of the teapot to deflect Countess Quine's magic, and there were a lot of glass cases. She swung the broom against the nearest case. "Smashy," Cricket said. "I love it." She leaned hard on a case until it toppled over. Anouk slammed the broomstick into another case and then started on another as a fleet of royals rounded the corner. "Right," Beau said. "Time to go, Cabbage." Anouk pulled the beastie spell from the broomstick's handle, put it in her pocket, and then tossed the broom aside. They ran. Anouk could hear the slushing sounds of whispers behind them, but she didn't dare glance back. The clinking of broken glass meant the duchesses were close. They charged through the maze of hallways. Rain pelted the windows. Crows flapped their wings just beyond the glass, cawing and screeching. "Which way?" Anouk cried. Cricket held up her forearm as they ran, consulting the map, trying to figure out the calculations based on the shifting rooms. Left, no right. They skittered around a corner, dragging Vigo with them as fast as they could. There, Anouk cried in relief. The elevator's just ahead. But she heard the start of a whisper behind her, not just any whisper, but the one she recognized, one to shut doors permanently, and ahead, the wide-open doors of the elevator gave a sudden shudder and began to close. No, her muscles burned. Her face felt hot. She ran as fast as she could, Cricket on her heels, Bo and Hunter Black practically carrying Vigo between them. But it was too late. The doors were closing, nearly shut. They wouldn't reach it in time. No! Then a shadow moved in the elevator. Someone was there, inside. She couldn't see who, but whoever it was, that person was their last chance. Hold the elevator, she cried. The doors continued to close. All that remained was 4 inches. 3, 2. Please hold the elevator. At the last possible second, a hand shot into the narrow space between the doors, a hand with black fingernail polish and a tattoo of a broken heart on the back. A bell dinged. The elevator doors paused, then slowly they began to open again. It was the goblin, Tenpenny, his rat still on his shoulder. He grinned at them with his maniacal smile, but then his eyes shifted to the army of royals pursuing them, and he frowned. Anouk crashed against the half-opened elevator doors and shoved her way between them, enough to slip in. Cricket pushed the doors open wide enough for Hunter Black and Bo to help Vigo hobble inside. Close it, Cricket yelled once they were all on board. Anouk threw herself against the buttons, pounding on anything that would ding or light up. But the doors didn't close, no lights came on. She felt panic clawing beneath her skin. The royals were almost on them, close enough that she could see the smeared blue powder on Countess Quine's scowling lips. Tenpenny inserted his master key in the controls. Going down, I assume? Yes, yes. He twisted the key, and at last the doors began to close. Chapter 29. 6 hours of enchantment remain. Anouk slumped against the closed doors, and her flushed face reflected an endless succession in the mirrored walls. She'd never been so thankful for a brief moment of peace. The elevator descended slowly, rumbling beneath her. Bo rested his head against the mirror, face tipped toward the lights that illuminated the bruise across his face, which was turning a nasty shade of plum. Look, man, Vigo said to the goblin, I know you wanted us to go to your party and all that, but Tenpenny grabbed Vigo by the collar and jerked him downward until they were eye to eye. Look, boy, you can't possibly be stupid enough to think this is about a party. I wouldn't risk incurring the ire of the royals so that you could cut a rug. He released Vigo's crumpled collar before smoothing a hand over his own blue cravat. We've had our bright little eyes on you, beasties, wondering like everyone else in the Hote, if you're as powerful as the rumors say. Bright little eyes. Anouk gasped as she remembered where she'd seen him before, though his hair had been covering the tips of his ears. You were the waiter at the cafe of the Saint Deseret. You've been following us. Naturally. Tenpenny replaced the golden key in his left breast pocket, then sorted through his dozen or so other pocket watch chains, muttering to himself until he found the one he was looking for. It connected to a monocle, which he cleaned with his cravat and held to his eye. The swipe of gold eyeliner on his upper lid glittered beneath the magnification. We had to be certain of 2 things. First, that you could indeed do magic. Second, that you weren't a puppet of the royals. We're nobody's puppets, Cricket asserted, and the royals can vociferer foot. Tenpenny turned his monocle on Cricket and inspected her from head to toe. What positively foul words from such a beautiful mouth. I'm of a mind to fall in love with you, my dear. He put away the monocle and consulted the elevator's floor dial. Its brass arrow dropped to the 5th floor. Time is short. As soon as we disembark, the elevator will return to the penthouse to collect the royals. We have only a few minutes head to start on him. I can get you to safety, but there is a cost for my assistance. The elevator's dial's arm dropped to the 4th floor, then the 3rd. The more distance between them and the royals, the more Anouk felt the tightness in her chest ease. But they were far from being out of harm's way yet. We'll pay whatever it takes, she said, if you can keep us human. Tenpenny stroked the pet rat perched on his shoulder, considering this. I have a few ideas, none of them pretty, mind you, none of them guaranteed, but there's a chance. We have only till midnight. Oh, then it'll certainly not be pretty. He wagged a finger at them. Listen closely, my beastie friends. For the past 3 years, the 5 grandest witches of Britain have been clearing London of goblins. They call themselves the Coven of Oxford. Chasing us out or slaughtering us, they don't care. A few months ago, they succeeded in ridding the city of the last of us, and we came here to Paris in exile. We need you to help us retake our city. The elevator reached the bottom floor with a sudden lurch. Anouk's heart leaped. She grabbed a brass sconce to steady herself. Well, beasties, do we have a deal? Ding. Anouk, thinking of the vicious marble lady, sputtered out desperately yes. Tenpenny danced eagerly from one foot to the other. The pet rat mirrored him, scampering from one of his shoulders to the other. The doors opened to the foyer, and Anouk took everything in, the gleaming white walls, the ivory desk, the wall of glass with the single turnstile, and the marble ladies, not immobile now. 4 alabaster faces turned like clockwork, and the elevator rumbled open. All too fast, they came striding toward the elevator, arms raised, stone hands reaching. They're coming, Anouk cried. The marble lady in front slammed one stone hand against a door jamb, holding the elevator open. Another behind her swiveled her head toward Anouk. Her features remained motionless, but her hands curled into fists. Anouk shrieked and scrambled as far back into the elevator as she could. Tenpenny! The goblin unlatched his pet rat's collar and held the creature up so they were nose to nose. With a great sigh, he said, I'm sorry, old friend, but we both knew it would come to this. Just as Anouk was about to yell again for him to do something, the rat made a heart-wrenching final squeak, and Tenpenny bit its head off. A revolting crunch as the spine snapped. Someone, one of the boys, screamed. Blood sprayed from the rat's neck, decorating the elevator's mirrored walls with garlands of red. Anouk couldn't get away in time. Blood speckled her apron. A vile-tasting bubble pushed up her throat, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, staggering backward into the corner of the elevator. Viggo tried to go to her, but a marble lady grabbed him by the back of his shirt. Hunter Black hurled himself against her arm, but he might as well have been fighting iron bars. The marble lady didn't flinch. Tenpenny spat the rat head on the gleaming floor and then tipped the little furry body over and gurgled down its blood. Transfixa petrifié, he whispered. Transfixa, the third marble lady, stepped into the elevator. Cricket dodged her just as the lady's fist smashed into the mirror, sending broken bits of glass raining down. It happened so fast that Anouk wasn't sure if she'd been cut or not. All she could feel was shockingly solid fingers clamped down on the back of her skull, gripping her painfully by the hair. The marble lady had her. It's too late, Anouk thought. But then Tenpenny dabbed blood from the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief and pronounced the final word of the whisper, petrifié. The marble lady clutching Anouk's hair froze. All 4 of the marble ladies were as still as statues they should have been, except, of course, that Anouk had never heard of statues that were posed for a fight with clenched fists. She winced, even frozen. The statue's fingers coiled painfully around her ponytail. She disentangled herself with care, tugging the last few strands out by force, and rubbed her stinging scalp. The other beasties looked equally stunned and equally spattered with blood. It was perfectly quiet in the foyer, with the marble ladies suspended in time like a drawing in a book, never to break their poses until Anouk exclaimed to Tenpenny, You killed your rat! Yes, my dear, that's what goblins do. Bo started for the exit, but Tenpenny Not so fast, it's raining. So, Bo said. These boots are suede. The goblin poked at a collection of black umbrellas in a stand by the door until he found the one he was looking for, and pointed the end toward Bo. Now, dear boy, we make our escape. Bo rolled his eyes as he shouldered open the door. The rain was coming down in sheets against the pavement. It seemed impossibly dark, too dark. The streetlights are all out, Anouk thought, until she heard a sharp call. Crows, Bo said. There were hundreds of them. On each awning, on every branch, perched so thick in the streetlights that they blocked the light. Never mind them, Tenpenny said. Hop on, beasties. 5 motorcycles stood in the driveway. 4 were manned by goblin drivers in rain slickers and galoshes, each clutching a large black umbrella identical to Tenpenny's. Tenpenny mounted the 5th motorcycle, not letting go of his umbrella, and revved the engine with one hand. Anouk gasped. "Wait, we forgot about the oubliette. We left it in the car. Our pelts." The driveway was empty, no sign of the Rolls-Royce. Anouk's thoughts were a storm. Who had the pelts? What if they were destroyed? How could they uphold the spell without them? No, we didn't. Beau ducked through the rain toward the bust of Prince Renard and rummaged through the bushes until he extracted a few objects. "The oubliette!" Anouk cried. "And my jacket!" Beau grinned. "I'd never let that bag fall into the wrong hands. I stashed it in the bushes as soon as we arrived." Anouk pressed the Faustine jacket to her face. A ticking sound came from somewhere, and she rooted through the pockets until she found the black cat clock. Her stomach dropped as she saw the time. 5 hours until midnight. As though he sensed time slipping away too, Tenpenny called through the rain, "Quickly now, beasties." Cricket leaned toward Anouk. "Are we seriously trusting goblins? Do we have a choice?" "Maybe not," Hunter Black growled, "but I'm driving." He jerked his thumb at a driver, indicating that the goblin should scoot to the passenger's place, and climbed in front. Cricket threw her hands up, exasperated. "I'll take Blondie." She climbed on behind a goblin girl with long blonde pigtails who flashed her a golden-toothed smile. Beau and Anouk helped Vigo climb onto the 3rd motorcycle behind a boy with spiky green hair, and Beau joined a driver wearing a top hat. "Now you, dearie, hold on tight." Tenpenny padded to the empty place behind him. Anouk hiked up the torn hems of her maid's costume to climb on. What exactly was she supposed to hold on to? This was even more terrifying than riding in a car for the first time. She gripped a metal bar behind the seat, searching for a place to rest her feet, when suddenly Tenpenny peeled out, and she shrieked, nearly tumbling off. "I said hold on," he called back to her. The tires squealed in the rain and threw up sheets of water behind them. She wrapped her arms around his middle. This was not like flying. This felt more like dying. Tenpenny accelerated down Boulevard Saint-Germain at breakneck speed, still clasping the umbrella in one hand. She dared to look behind her. 5 motorcycles in all, and 4 umbrellas. Hunter Black scoffed at the idea of rain protection, roaring through the stormy streets of Paris. Crows took off from every street lamp as they passed, causing each light to glow brightly, illuminating their path as though to say, "Here they are, Renard, they're right here." The din of wings was deafening, louder than the peals of thunder and the honks of cars as the line of motorcycles weaved through traffic. Ahead, 2 delivery trucks drove impossibly close together, but Tenpenny revved the engine and aimed for the narrow space between. Anouk shut her eyes, then instantly changed her mind and opened them. The weaving motion made her even queasier when she wasn't watching the road. She squeezed Tenpenny tighter. "Where are you taking us?" she shouted into his ear. "Where the crows can't follow," he cackled. She pressed her forehead into his back, his suit and threads of metallic gold woven into it, and she thought of her hastily sewn maid's uniform, practically in tatters now. Large patches of skin on her back and shoulder were visible through the seams barely held together by garden wire. She thought briefly of Petra giving her the wire, and Matazola. She had thought she could be happy at the Chateau de Mille Fleurs. What a fool she'd been. Beau and Cricket had warned her, and yet, once more, she had fallen for a witch's promises. Never again, she vowed. Petra at least had helped them. Because of her, Renard had decided to keep them alive. She felt a stab of affection for the witch's girl. It couldn't have been easy to go behind her mistress's back to share information with Renard. Did Zola know of what she'd done? Had Petra been punished? She looked over her shoulder again. Cricket was holding the umbrella for her goblin driver, who was using her free hand to take a swig of something from a flask. Hunter Black brought up the tail end, weaving through the traffic just as skillfully as the goblins. Beau caught her eye and shook his head as though to say, "What in the world are we doing? Riding on the back of motorcycles teamed up with Vigo and Hunter Black and goblins? With only hours left before its spell wore off." Rain streaked down his hair, matting it into his face, and he looked scared, terrified, but even more than that, determined. They were in a serious mess, yes. It was doubtful they could trust the goblins, true. But they were alive. They'd escaped Castle Ides, eluded the most powerful members of the Hote, and they were still human. They could still feel rain on their faces, could still yell overhead at the crows, Go se faire foot, but it wasn't over yet. And then suddenly she was falling forward. She gasped and clung hard to Tenpenny. The world had gone darker. The rain abruptly stopped. She was bouncing wildly, her teeth chattering in her head. Thunk, 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 thunk. It took her a second to realize that they had plunged down the stairs of a metro station. People shrieked and jumped out of the way as the procession of motorcycles jostled down the steep stairs. Signs flashed by her. Belvedere Station. At last they reached the platform, and she no longer felt like her teeth were being jostled loose. But then more screams rang out as Tenpenny roared straight through the crowd of passengers awaiting the next train. The platform ended ahead in tiled wall. Where were they going to? A second before they would have crashed spectacularly into the tile wall. Tenpenny jerked the bike to the left and jumped it straight off the platform and into the metro tunnel. Bum, 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 the bars of the metro track beneath them. If the motorcycle had a headlight, Tenpenny didn't turn it on, and they plunged into pure blackness. A rumble from somewhere deep, the whine of the other engines behind them. She tightened her hold, biting her lip, and then at last she saw the light up ahead. She could see graffiti covering the walls, names and phrases. Bye-bye, Paris. L'amour est mort. The light grew brighter. She had to shade her eyes. Something big rumbled and squealed. Something headed for them. A train. You're going to kill us. Tenpenny's only answer was to rev the engine. He leaned forward, driving even faster. The incoming train let out a prolonged honk, a warning. The light was growing even brighter. She felt a scream hurtling up her throat as the train grew closer and closer, almost on them, and then a moment before impact, darkness again. Tenpenny had turned down a side tunnel at the last second. She glanced back, saw the glint of 4 other motorcycles with relief. They had all made it. The tunnel wasn't like a greasy-smelling metro line. There were no lights, which wasn't a problem for the goblins, who could see in the dark. But she couldn't. She felt rough walls pressing in, a low ceiling. It smelled of stale air and ancient stone. Water trickled from somewhere. The old aqueduct might be nearby. Or, at the least, sewage pipes. A faint light shone at the far end of the tunnel, a warm, flickering orange like fire. As they neared, she could make out that the tunnels were of hewn limestone, briny with lichen, twigs and trash pushed to the sides, and bones. She'd never seen a human bone before, but there was no mistaking the length of those femurs, the curve of a cracked skull. They were the catacombs. The tunnel spat them out into a large chamber that was lit only by a roaring bonfire. She thought the catacombs were all twisting narrow mazes with low ceilings, but this was cavernous. How could such a large space exist beneath the city? Tenpenny parked next to a structure that on further inspection appeared to be an abandoned metro train. Someone had spray-painted the Black Death on it, and the windows had been pushed out to make a bar filled with bottles of colorful liquids. Music with a thumping bass pumped out of the speakers where the engine had been. Dozens of goblins were gathered around, most holding teacups, and the sound of the motorcycles more powered out of smaller tunnels and tombs and crypts into the cavern. Tenpenny dismounted with a flourish. Welcome, dearies, to the Catacomb Club. Let's get some lights in here for our guests. Torches appeared and lit up the cavern. The goblins crowded around. She felt swept up in a twister of bright colors, bowler hats, glittering makeup, and clinking teacups. The music blasted over the chatter of excited voices. On every wall was graffiti, but not like in the metro tunnels. This was beautiful but strange. Grinning bared teeth, sea monster tentacles, patterns of neon spiderwebs, anatomical hearts. The goblins swarmed her. She heard Cricket yell a warning, but the crowd didn't stop until they had dragged the 5 of them off the backs of the motorcycles and to the raging bonfire in the front of the Black Death rail car. Anouk fought and twisted against the many hands holding her, but the goblins threw out whispers that made her fingers just slip off them. Their whispers were different from the witches, not softly murmured, but almost spat out. And then more arms were lifting her, until she dragged to the top of the metro car onto a sort of makeshift stage. Cricket and Bo and Vigo and Hunter Black were dragged up beside her. From here she could see the entire cavern of the Catacomb Club. Art Deco lanterns had been stolen from abandoned metro stations to decorate various smaller crypts, and they came on one by one, the light glistening off skulls that lined the ceiling like grinning macabre molding. Someone had made a throne out of bones. Tenpenny jumped up beside them, grinning proudly. He still had traces of rat blood on his cravat. "Goblins in exile," he said. "I promised you a means to return to London. These beasties have agreed to undertake a task against impossible odds. A risk of the deadliest proportions, a quest of untold dangers." Bo leaned toward Anouk. What exactly did we agree to?" Standing unsteadily on top of the abandoned rail car, she felt tipsy. Hundreds of goblin faces peered up at her, with wide grins and hopeful eyes and slightly pointed ears. Their makeup made them look like people you'd turn away from on a dark street. But they weren't vicious. Goblins loved little pranks and fabulous clothing. These were the lowest of the haute, magical only in the most basic ways, just magical enough to do the dirty work for witches. She thought of the goblin girl whom Mata Vittoria had made fall in love with the mail truck. These weren't their enemies, she knew. That was a start, at least. "Now," Tenpenny said, patting her on the back, "I believe there is a talk of a party." Someone cranked up the music. The whole train car started vibrating to the beat of beneath her feet. "About this dangerous quest," Anouk started. Yes, yes, we're grateful for your selfless sacrifice, all of you. But first let us celebrate. London shall soon be once more the heart and the home of the goblins." He shoved Anouk, then Cricket, and then the rest of them off the stage and into the throngs of exuberant goblin revellers. Okay, we now have 10 chapters left, but I feel like I need to stop here to rest my voice for a little while. Um, so thank you for listening. I will read some more after a little while. I'm not sure when I will read more, but thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.